Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Doof Game Club, Doof Media's exploration of the joy of play. I'm Ruben Morehouse,
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
and
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
please.
we didn't practice this at all. I'm Elliot Harriman. I'm a friend of the podcast. I got recruited to help talk about queer things this month on our special queer episode.
Yes.
Um, Please someone
Yeah.
else take over. I'm just gonna keep talking if you let me.
No, that's what you're here for. To pad out so we have time to drink water, etc. Um,
Fantastic.
no, yes. Obviously, since we're diving into a bunch of queer games and different experiences to Elliot and my own, it would obviously be a bit stupid to do this show without as two white cis dudes without allowing ourselves to experience some different perspectives, and so that's what we're here to do this month. I mean, I guess it's fair to say that the whole point of the game club really was to expose ourselves to different perspectives, different types of games, and so this is a natural extension of that, and that's why we're, other than just enjoying having you around, Gelliot. Obviously, this is why we're very thrilled to have you here this month.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to be here. Absolutely
Uh,
thrilled. I'm even more thrilled that we didn't pick Dream Daddy or Life is Strange could have been interesting, but you know what? I think Celeste was a good call. You did good.
and
Thank you, community, for your tyranny of the majority.
yeah, we got there in the end with the vote. So yeah, this month obviously we're talking about Celeste, and we're diving into what we are calling Elliot's mixtape, which is just a selection of smaller narrative-driven experiences that you've selected in advance. We obviously the main focus of the game club was Celeste, so we'll be spending the majority of time talking about that, but we will also be talking about these other experiences and how they resonated with us.
Yeah.
Easy.
So of course we're talking about Celeste. The first thing that we need to do is show our cred. So let's see it, Elliot. Bring it up.
Yep.
There it
Here's all our
is.
death counts.
Yeah, I've definitely got Yol beat. I can't say.
65 hours. Wow.
Yeah,
Solid.
look, I left it on overnight a couple of times, so I'm not sure how accurate a number this actually is.
Mm.
When I went back to beat the game, I got through it in like 3 or 4 hours with my newly acquired actual skill. So I don't think it's quite that high in reality, but you can't fake that death count. So yeah, I put a lot of time into this game.
Well, I
Which is
imagine like almost half of that death count is just chapter 9, based on everything you've
uh
said.
genuinely, yes, it was a third. It was
Yeah.
6.4 thousand went into that. And I'm not sure how that breaks down into like sub chapters. I'm not sure how much was spent on the comb room or the final screen, but yeah, that was a fun, interesting, relaxing experience. Farewell.
Yeah. Because I'd say I'm about halfway through Farewell, and about a third of my deaths would already just be Farewell.
Oh yeah, easily. Like it's the seasides too were a little brutal. Like I think the game pops up very early with a reminder that like the deaths is something you should be proud of, or at least not embarrassed of.
Mm.
Which I think is a helpful reminder that they kind of undo entirely by then counting and prominently displaying how many times you died. Um, I don't know, it just feels like a little bit like negative reinforcement. But
Yeah.
looking back, I mean,
See, I,
I don't
I,
know,
I think I've swung around on it. Like when I started, I had the same response where it was sort of like,
mm,
the first time I ever played 1A, and then like the
mm,
game was like, you died 90
yeah,
times. I was
yes.
like, how dare you? And then like I remember like getting the message that it was like, you should be proud of your death count. I was like, stop judging
Right.
me. But I think like I've swung around now at this point to like when I see that you've got like 18,500 deaths, I'm like, holy shit, she has like
Mm.
done well in this game. Like you've
I
done a
mean, I
lot.
saw your Slack screenshots. I think that might be a slightly polished opinion, but you know what? I'll take it. Um, I'm seeing in the Discord now someone's got me beat in terms of strawberries and deaths and time, uh, and
Wow.
still manage all of this. So I mean, you know, if you look at the I remember really distinctly when I was like 10, I was really excited to play Mirror's Edge. And then I saw someone say like you can beat it in like 3 hours or like 1 hour once you know what you're doing. And I was really like discouraged. I was like, wow, that kind of sucks. Like it's a short game. And a friend had to sit me down and be like, yeah, but you're going to spend like 40, 50 hours practicing to get to that point. Like you're going to get enjoyment from this game. And by the time you're able to run through that quickly and pull up these things, like it'll feel real and rewarding and it'll have been a good time. And I think that kind of feels about right with Celeste. Like going back to replay the campaign, it took me a few hours. I got through I've gotten a couple of Goldens now, which I never thought I'd do. I never thought I'd get any seasides or well done. It is a really gradual learning curve, and I don't think I ever noticed myself getting tangibly better at the game, but actually managing to get that Moonberry, like, I think that's emblematic of some sort of improvement. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. We'll obviously talk about the narrative behind this game and how it's so metaphorically important that it's about getting over a mountain, right? Both for the character of Madeline and also the developer. But
yeah. Yes.
Also, the fact that this is a game where you are climbing a mountain just mechanically works really well, right? Like you feel yourself.
It really does. Yeah.
In the story in a way that is really tangible.
And I think the low poly map screen, it's the only thing that's rendered in 3D in the game. I was a little unsure about it at first, but I think it works really well to sort of track your progress as you're climbing. And even chapter 6, which kind of throws you to the bottom, the camera is still located very high. It's just looking down at a low angle. Like you are still tangibly moving up the mountain every time. And when you hit farewell, it's kind of zooms up even higher to the moon. Like it does. Every element of this game does sort of feel like you are progressing and climbing that mountain, and it's a very classic, simple metaphor. Like it's I can't think of any examples right now, honestly, but I'm sure if you went back to look through Bullfinch, like there would be a fair few myths and legends that rely on that metaphor. Yeah.
This is actually a great segue into sort of, I think, the next thing we want to talk about, because chapter 7, I think, just conceptually is one of the coolest ideas ever, because what you do is you fundamentally change the gameplay by giving you the second dash, and then you sort of replay the entire game in a way. Like you go through every other level and play harder remixes that require you to use your new skills, and they're shorter, so it's like you kind of zoom through the whole game. And I think that so well captures what Celeste is about, the way you sort of pick yourself up from the bottom and just redo it quicker the next time.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, it's kind of phenomenally done. I find it really interesting too how like the remixed 7A levels are much harder, like tangibly so, but with a second dash, I didn't find myself really struggling at all. Like it was just kind of let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's
It's a very natural extension.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the story just did an amazing job of getting me in that headspace of like, I remember when I first played the game, I bounced off it because I got annoyed that it locked me out from finding strawberries and quit. But the second time I played it, I finished the game. I got up to level 7, and it was just like this headspace of like extreme determination. I think that the game did an amazing job of marrying the main character's perspective to the players. And I think that's something that kind of continues through to Farewell. But 7A is really the height of it. It's just an incredible piece of design, and I love it a lot.
It feels so good to play. So like, what we've got on the slides at the moment, I think this is Ruben, his playthrough where he discovered that you could like zoom into the space blocks. I don't know if they have a technical term.
No, that's the technical term.
But
I've had space blocks, star blocks. I'm not sure what they're called in the code.
But yeah, like I think, so sort of what I wanted to talk about with when I was thinking of this slide was like, Celeste does such a good job at getting the full potential out of its mechanics. Like, because at its core, the gimmick of Celeste as a platformer is the dash, really. and it's just remarkable how much the game gets out of it. Like Chapter 2 was the moment where I was like, oh, this is a very good game, where you first go through a space block and you're like, oh, holy shit, like, okay.
It really shows you that there's more that is going to come up in this game than you might initially expect.
And someone clever in the chat called Mike. Oh, sorry.
No, you go. You go.
Oh, just someone clever in the chat called Mike is saying that the code calls them Space Jam, and I was going to make that joke and then felt a little dumb, but I'm glad to know that someone else beat me to
it. It's a canon joke. Yeah, like this ethos of like, you know, using all these mechanics to their full potential goes right through. Like, so Chapter 7 and 8 both fundamentally sort of change how you interact with like the core of the game. Like Chapter 7 gives you the second dash. Chapter 8 takes away your dash refresh, which is a very fun like, oh shit moment when you first realize.
It's interesting. I have a lot of thoughts on core, and I sort of don't. I mean, we can get to that. We can do it now. I've got no idea, but I didn't actually love core that much, and I think part of that comes down to not really knowing why it existed narratively. And I think that perspective is probably coming from someone who didn't finish the game, or didn't finish it this time at least, until Farewell was released. Because that then exists as like a natural extension to the canon. It sort of like continues this story and Madeline's perspective. And I'm not totally sure where core exists there, I guess.
I do tend to agree. Core is this like weird epilogue, but not even really an epilogue. It's just kind of like, I have more ideas for levels, so here we go.
That's really interesting, actually, because that's what Farewell was originally. It was meant to just be like, I think like 30 to 50 extra screens that were stupidly difficult. And they were meant to incorporate like existing mechanics. I think they're just past the heart gate. I could be wrong. But when Maddie posted a whole article about this and the development of Farewell, and basically what happened was they had to start their new company. They had to deal with immigration, and they realized they had a big hole in their schedule. So they spent time creating, instead of just making this an extra level pack, they basically created a whole narrative around it. And I think that shows a tiny bit in places, because Farewell is just excruciatingly long in times. I think it's a great experience and a great narrative, but if they trimmed out half the screens, I would not have noticed or complained. Yeah.
Or yeah, like Farewell could easily be split up into 2 to 3 chapters, and they'd still be full-length chapters.
Yeah, and if you look at the speedrun times in particular, it really is just by far the longest level. And I think that's necessary in a way, because the sort of the movements that Maddie the character goes through, I mean, it's kind of stages of grief. It's kind of this willingness to accept help from others, and there's a lot going on there. But I think doing that really requires frustrating the player, which they pulled off magnificently, I have to say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we've got a slide for Farewell a bit later, actually. So
we can jump into that.
We can go into
much
it
more deeper later.
But, yeah, I think I agree that like core for me was just I didn't engage with any story that it might have been producing. Like it was very much just a gameplay level.
Yeah.
And I really like it as a gameplay level, but I agree it stands out in that it's just like, here's the heart of the mountain, and you're gonna hug yourself at the end of it. I think that's the story.
I definitely, if there was something narratively going on there, then I kind of missed it. I remember there being text at the end, but I sort of never put together where it exists within the game's broader narrative framework. If anyone in chat has figured this out, please tell me. But yeah, someone's saying that core is like an epilogue for Maddie, whereas Farewell is more like a short story separate game, and I could see that. I think it's like Oh, here we go. We're getting up to battle. Um,
Yeah, that would be my framing. Honestly, is like I saw core as this sort of epilogue, and then farewell is almost like a small sequel.
mhm.
It felt that monumental, and it's doing interesting enough stuff. But yeah, I just think like even if you sort of look at core, like just to speak of it gameplay wise,
Mhm.
it continues this trend that we'll get into soon about like how they come up with interesting sets of mechanics for each one. But it also has these cool bits right at the end where it uses the mechanics of every other level in one screen.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and like there's stuff like that. Like I think Celeste is really willing to try and milk these mechanics for everything they're worth, and that includes like combining them in all these new and interesting ways,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
is why it works so well for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No, I absolutely agree.
yeah.
Um, the generally the last screen of any core level is just an exercise in frustration and having to figure out through reflex alone what that old mechanic was about and how I meant to use it. But
Yeah.
no, it's I think it works really well. And again, that kind of comes up again in Farewell. I think it largely emphasizes the two new mechanics, the jellyfish and the pufferfish, but there is a large section in the middle that is entirely just old mechanics basically and remixing them.
Yeah.
And I think it really, really works well. Yeah.
I
I wonder whether our reactions to core as opposed to farewell is dependent on how we experience the game, because how much we were collectors specifically, I should say, because as somebody who had been trying to find things as I was playing through, I already had enough crystal hearts to immediately enter core, and so it wasn't like I went back and did some gameplay and then got a little bit of small narrative payoff. It was just kind of a little slight epilogue when I'd already kind of experienced the main story, and so I agree, it didn't stick out to me almost at all, right? But perhaps if I wasn't a collector and needed to go back and get some crystal hearts first, it might have been like more of a, okay, I've done some mechanical stuff, now I get a bit more of a, you know,
It
narrative
definitely
payoff.
does. It is the first time that the player, like if the player hasn't run into any hearts before now, which is absolutely possible, I can't think of any that are really easy to stumble on. This is like the first hint that there's more to the game in terms of collectibles. And more in terms of mechanics too, because having to find those crystal hearts really forces you to engage with the game mechanically. And here I am kind of assuming that they were designed without walkthroughs in mind. I saw someone in the Discord was collecting those last two strawberries in 7A. I don't know if you collected them, but there's a couple that require you to fall off screen to your death, presumably in like a very narrow hole with absolutely no indication that that is where the strawberries are. Yeah, so there's a lot of collectibles like that, and I think core is the first hint that they exist and that there's more to the mechanics that you might need to engage with. But the payoff for that is harder levels, and then the payoff for those harder levels is more harder levels. And I think it's really not until Farewell came out that there became a tangible, like, I'm coming at this from a perspective of someone who really only cares about narratives in games. Like, if I didn't care about the narrative here, I would have quit the same day I quit getting over it with Funny. Like, I was absolutely only here because I cared about the characters and story. But Farewell existing and requiring all of the B-sides to be done, and also a lot of the skills you learn in the C-sides, that really actually drove me to finish them and engage with them and engage with the game in that way. I don't know. I think it's just a very different game knowing now that Farewell exists, and I think it's much better for it. Yeah.
yeah, I tend to agree. Um, yeah. Well, this sort of
Yeah, I agree too.
transitions to our next slide, which if my mouse
Yes.
will work.
I mean, we've kind of been talking around it a little bit, haven't we?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, yes, probably.
So this is our one on just sort of the gameplay loop of Celeste.
Mm-hmm.
Which like I just wanted to call out because I just love screens as a concept, like the way this game, it's like lots of mini checkpoints.
Yeah.
With the ability to make longer ones when Maddie's feeling mean, but um, like I think one of the just one of the reasons I don't think I've played this game for less than 4 hours at a time. I just get
Mm-hmm.
lost in it, and it's because the death to retry cycle is so swift. Whereas like
Yeah.
yeah, like I play a lot of Mario Maker is probably the other platform I play the most, and it's just
Mhm.
it's like a good 5 to 10 seconds between Mario dying and you getting another shot, and that just
Yeah.
is a momentum killer. Celeste, it's like a second.
And not to mention that the thing that you died on in Mario, it might take you another 30 seconds, a minute, even 2 minutes to get up to the part where you actually were
Yeah,
struggling.
because
Right?
they've just got like the
I'm
1 to 2
so glad
checkpoints.
Celeste never had any levels like that. Yeah, I remember when Super Meat Boy first came out, that
Yeah.
a huge part of why I think it caught on was that instant respawn.
Yeah.
Celeste isn't quite as fast, but I think it really clearly took inspiration from there.
Yeah, and it's better for it in my opinion. Like
It
yeah.
really is. The levels that are like this one right here on screen, it's not terribly long. I think it feels a bit a little more arduous, especially since Celestial Resort, the third level, was kind of, from what I remember, I think I read an article about this from Maddie. It was designed to have more of like a marathon feel to it. Or that like the difficulty here was about like simple tasks, but many over a sustained period of time without checkpoints versus just like a very hard, self-contained short jump or dash or whatever. I think maybe I find these longer endurance ones a little exhausting, and I had a lot of trouble with those parts in the Seasides and Farewell, where you just really have to precision platform for 90 seconds straight.
There's one
When the
farewell screen I got to,
yes,
and I died towards the end of it, and it sent me right back to the start, and I was like, "Oh, get fucked!"
yeah,
Like I sight read like half of this screen, and then it still sent me
and
back.
it's just
Fuck you.
I remember 7C and 8C especially were. I mean, they're not terrible. It's just no, they're terrible. They're really bad. You have to. Um, I think they're probably 90 seconds to 2 minutes long a piece. And if you want to like start like if you want to get through them, you need to like learn them and fail and die, and that's kind of easy generally. But on these specific levels, it takes 60 seconds to get back to wherever you died. And if you need to die 100 times to get through this level, it starts getting really frustrating. 7C especially, I've heard people quote like 7,000 deaths for it, which doesn't surprise me at all. And I wonder how much of that is just like exhaustion and trying to get back to that really tricky bit at the very end, you know?
Yeah. Well, the time I finally managed to stop playing Farewell, which is like one of the first times I've ever stopped a level halfway through, is
Mhm.
because I'd been playing for so long that I was only making about 10% of my wave dashes down from
Yeah.
like 70-ish.
Yes.
And it was just like after a while where I was like, okay, I'm not even making wave dashes now. Why am I still playing?
Yeah, absolutely. You start getting that exhaustion that sets in, and you just lose that muscle memory. And
Mm.
when I think that's why it took me so many days to beat Farewell, because I just had to keep going to bed whenever
Yeah.
it happened, because there was no way to outstop in that. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old. Who knows?
Yeah. But yeah, so like as well as the screens though, I think Celeste does this really cool thing where each of the levels as well has like 2 to 4 mechanics that are kind of
Mm,
unique to it.
yeah,
And the game does a really good job of like introducing each one individually and then starting to combine them, particularly in the B and C sides. Um,
yeah, for sure.
but like, we've got footage of like World 4, well, technically World 7, um, on the screen right now. And
Mm,
that's one where it's like, it's got the wind, it's got those little blue balls
The
that are
clouds.
shitty versions of the red balls. It's got, the
yeah,
clouds. And yeah, like I think it's really cool. Like, I think Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze does the same thing. There's like a whole Game Maker's Toolkit video about this formula of.
I was just about to say, like, this. I remember that video talked a lot about Mario and that approach to it, and I've noticed that Maddie's been playing a lot of Super Mario World hacks recently as inspiration for whatever they're working on next, which doesn't make me feel good because they all look incredibly difficult.
Mario World hacks are sadistic, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, just universally.
Yeah, they don't need inspiration from those.
But yeah, absolutely. Like that was a really clear design influence here. Like even in the A side of this level 4, there's a Mario block. I can't remember. Like I don't know what it's reference to. I didn't think I got any of the hearts without a walkthrough. But
yeah, I had to use a walkthrough of that because I haven't played Mario 3.
Exactly, right.
That's a classic. That's such a classic. That was one of the only hearts where I was like immediately, oh shit, this is awesome. I know how to get it.
I'm not even a millennial. I don't know what you want from me. I've never earned. I started out on a PS2. Like this is.
You've never owned a Mario.
I've never owned a Mario. That's right.
I've played Mario Maker. Like Mario Maker is actually the only 2D Mario game I've ever played.
Oh, interesting. I remember playing the DS one and just being absolutely terrible at it. Oh god, that's a lot of nostalgia. I lived across the road from someone who had like a DS, and we'd always play Mario Kart. But at some point, he got angry and bit his screen, like the top half of his DS. Oh yeah, he just bit it. So there was a huge like a huge just like crescent shape that was blacked out with like teeth marks. And every time I went over, I'd have to borrow that DS and try to play Mario Kart with half the screen bitten out. It was an experience. It's shaped me as a person. Yes.
Yeah. Wabo, I don't think it's a specific goal of mine anyway. I haven't actually ever played a Donkey Kong Country game. I just know.
You're a psychopath. Donkey Kong Country is the best series of games that has ever existed.
It's a Ruben goal because he fucking loves those games.
They're so good.
But yeah.
Iconic.
Okay, so if we move on to the next slide. Come on, Google. Don't fail me now. Oh yeah, so we just wanted to talk about assist mode as an idea. And again, this is something that's covered in a Mark Brown video. But what we have here is somebody doing... This is a clip shot from somebody getting the world record with assist mode on, which is apparently a category, and it's hilarious.
This feels slower than the actual 80% world record. I'm not sure what they're doing here. Is this just not a popular category? No, I've absolutely seen people play this faster. I think assist mode is really fascinating, especially on the back of Dark Souls last month, was it?
2 months ago, yeah.
2 months ago, yeah, because there was some light discussion recently on the internet around whether or not Dark Souls needed or deserved an easier mode for people to play it who wouldn't otherwise be able to stubborn it out, basically. And I think Celeste, I think, is a really interesting addition to that argument. Like, I'm absolutely really very much in favor of like anyone being able to play and complete these stories for the narratives. I also think that it's explicitly designed for the narrative to rely on that difficulty to function. I think if Celeste was just like 1,000 times easier, or I'd played through on assist mode, I wouldn't have connected to the struggle nearly as much.
Yeah, it's a tricky one with Celeste because the struggle is the point in Celeste.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Like, I've got a separate save file where I've activated assist mode to play around with stuff, and like there's a reason I've put that in a separate save file. It's because it doesn't feel like the genuine one to me, because I am capable of doing it without it.
Yeah,
I would add. I think there's a point that's worth making here, though, which is this. It's not the struggle that's the point. It's the struggle and then you still reaching the top. That's the point, right?
Like, yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
So thinking about it in that framing, I think really clarifies my thoughts about it, which is that if somebody isn't going to make it to the top,
otherwise,
because of difficulty reasons, then the story isn't going to work for them. You know, like just flat out, I would say.
I think that's why it exists. So people can play the story.
I should clarify my perspective a tiny bit here. I think it's like I am so glad it's part of the game.
Mm.
If someone asked me, like, should I enable this by default, I'd slap them with a newspaper. If someone said, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to quit this game unless I turn on assist mode, then absolutely, like 100%, I would encourage it. I had to beat a couple of the seasides, not with assist mode enabled, but like I used debug mode to set custom checkpoints just because my finger was hurting after beating the same section over and over again.
Yeah.
And that, like, it absolutely gave me less of a sense of like triumph and satisfaction once I finally did beat the level. And I'm absolutely certain I would not have gotten through it if I'd just been left to languish.
Yeah, like Mark Brown, he has a video on this, and he talks about this. Like the thing that he says works for it is because it's called like assist mode.
Right.
It doesn't judge you by turning off achievements or anything, but it's like making it something you have to turn on. Calling it assist mode very clearly flags this is not the default way to play the game. Like this
The
is what you
intended
should
experience.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what you should do if it isn't working.
And I think it does a good job of distinguishing itself from a cheat mode.
Yeah.
I just don't like. I've seen a lot of people still effectively treat it as such, and I think I've treated it as such a tiny bit myself, honestly. Um, I think like in an ideal world there would have been less of a stigma around it, or something they could have done to make it more. Cheat mode is also a thing. That's true. Cheat mode just unlocks every level if you jump on the car and fight the right way at the start of the game. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad it exists. I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I should also add that once you beat all of the seasides, you unlock variant mode, which is like assist mode but extra. There was if you go back and rewind and stop listening to me on the save file screen we posted, there's a little purple flag next to mine, and that's variant mode, and it basically just gives you a few extra things to make the game easier and also more difficult, and also the option to dash in any direction rather than just 8, which is a little fascinating that it's locked there. But
so that's like I wanted to talk about variant mode in our next slide actually. Because like it come on. Google, I swear.
okay.
So this is the one on controls. And like variant mode's so interesting to me because it feels more like less like a cheat mode or anything to me, and more like here are a bunch of mechanics that we took out of the game, but we programmed them and we wanted to include them anyway.
Right.
Like the 360 dashing very much feels like they had it in the game. They decided to take it out.
I'd have been surprised if it wasn't at some point an intended feature.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure why it was cut or why it was not even in the options menu. I have a suspicion it's something to do with the later levels in particular. Really, I don't know. I never really tried anything like core with 360 dashing on. The first few levels were fun and great, except for maybe the Space Jam. That was a reliable source of deaths. I don't know. I think it would certainly be a little harder to. Yeah, like if you're falling and you need to dash horizontally in like exactly a 90-degree angle.
I think it's a level design thing. Like I think it's just
that's what I'm trying to say. Yes, 100%. I don't know. I think it would have been nice to have as an option, but I can see why they removed it. Yeah,
I think
I'm the same.
Anything that this game can do to improve the preciseness of some of these aspects is and the reliability of some of the aspects of the level design is something that it really needs, as we will talk about.
But before you get into your incorrect rant, I guess like the only other things, I was like variant mode also has, I think, is it called bunny hop or something? Where
hiccuping.
Yeah, hiccuping. That's it. So you're kind of it's as if you're always on a cloud, like you're always bouncing every little bit.
Oh no! It's
What?
just no. Sorry, it's randomly. You randomly hiccup just like once every few seconds, and it gives you like a little boost. So it can screw up your jumps or it can give you some extra height.
Yeah.
But it's completely random. Yeah.
What?
You could see, like, that's another one that to me feels like a mechanic that they played around with including in the
Right.
level,
Yes.
and then they
Oh,
were sort of
I
like, yeah,
do not think they would have. God, I hope not. I really respect them as level designers. I would not be thrilled if that was an intentional. Oh God, no.
no, I could see it being something where you play with it for like a few minutes. It's like, what about something that like, gives you little boosts, and it's like a struggle or something. Then they probably played it for like a minute, and they're like, okay, no, this is terrible. We can't,
I
we
can't say I
can't play
tried it
this.
this way. I wouldn't. But yeah, at least 360 dashing, I found really much more comfortable on a controller because I mean, what we're all skirting around is that it is really hard to reliably dash in the right direction with a controller joystick. And you always have the D-pad. Like that's an option, but I know a lot of people have said that a good 40% of any deaths on controller are from just like thinking you're dashing horizontally, but instead going kind of
Yeah,
vertically, diagonally. That's the one. Yeah.
I think I played
Um,
about the first 3 levels with the
mm,
analog stick, and then I switched to the D-pad. Just because, yeah,
um,
the control stick, it just dashes in the wrong direction very often.
the when I went back, I played on keyboard, and when I went back to test out controller, I was really surprised to find that wave dashing was actually. And sorry for anyone who doesn't know, there's a bunch of like secret dashing tech in this game that lets you kind of dash really far and also regain your dash halfway through your flight through the air. It's all very crazy and requires precise button inputs. And Farewell in particular really relies on
Yep.
those techniques. I was really surprised to find that I could actually do it reliably with a controller. It probably wasn't quite as comfortable, but given how little time I'd spent on the controller to practice it, I was really surprised, yeah, that I could consistently pull it off.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm baffled that people use a keyboard over a controller for this. Like, I get the analog stick part of that, but like the D-pad feels so much more natural to me than a control,
I
than a
kind of
keyboard. Yeah.
I bound it to WASD and then IJKL. Like it was just kind of flipped it around. So it was essentially everyone's looking at their keyboard now.
Yeah.
It was essentially just like a D-pad and like face buttons, but I didn't have to plug in.
Yeah.
And I think at that point it's relatively similar. The only real difference is that it's easier to. I think a lot of D-pads don't let you input more than 2 directions at a time, which was never fully necessary, but I just found it more comfortable on a keyboard. Yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah. Oh, this screen was an absolute nightmare without dashing. I'm not sure if I should
Yeah.
talk about that with.
Yeah.
Sure,
Somebody
people will
mentioned.
explain that, but
Is it true that you can beat this game? Was it without dashing,
It's
without
just
climbing, or
this
something?
level. Yeah.
okay,
It's
yeah. So
you can do
this
a
level you
dash
can
this
beat
Oh.
level.
without dashing. You can beat the game without grabbing once you enable. There's a variant mode that lets you activate things without grabbing them, and you
Right.
at that point then can beat the game without grabbing. But yes, if you beat the game, if you beat this level without dashing, which is very tricky, you have to sort of jump off spikes consistently.
Oh, gross.
Then there's a secret extra strawberry at the end.
Oh my
That's a
god.
spoil. Yeah. So that's the 200th. And the only way you, any realistic way to figure that out is by collecting every other strawberry and realizing that it totals 199, which is a very, very odd number. And then from there, you have to somehow figure out that you can beat this level dashless. The first person to find it, they posted a video to Reddit that was just like, wow, isn't it amazing that you can do this? And then cut the video at the very end before they went to the final screen to show off the strawberry. So no one actually knew the strawberry existed.
Oh
They were
my
just like,
god.
yeah, I think that's a great way to do it, honestly.
It's hilarious.
And it's I've done some film review stuff and I've played a few games before release, and it's a really weird, like isolated experience, not having anyone to talk to about it and not being able to turn to a walkthrough.
Yep.
I would have had a difficult time playing and finishing this game if I hadn't been able to.
Oh, same.
Yeah.
I used walkthroughs for most of
Very
the
much of it.
parts.
I sort of wish I hadn't, but at the same time, I had other things to do and other games to play.
Yeah.
That's just the assist mode stigma coming back, I think.
Yeah, it's the same
Yes.
thing. Well, Ruben, do you want to get into your thoughts on the controls in this game?
Yeah, look, I found myself. I played this. How long did I play this game for? Probably about 10 hours all up, right?
Okay,
And I I found myself just consistently banging my head against the controls, like to the extent that I would say probably about 40% of my deaths in this game were just from pressing, like doing things that I didn't mean to do. Not even like mistiming something, but just like, oh, I accidentally grabbed instead of wall jumping, or accidentally jumped instead of dashed, or whatever, right?
That sounds like a you problem.
I mean, is it though? Is it?
I mean, it definitely. I'd just say usually we come to the game club, and I'm the one who had more problems with that than you, and I've never had that with this game. So
I really.
Didn't
you know
you
what I
have
wish?
some weird thing with your keyboard where you had to let go of keys?
So yes, weirdly, if I pressed too many keys at once, it also caused problems, and then like I could only press, I guess, 4 keys at a time or something. So that was the problem.
That's the keyboard. Wait, that's not the game. That's your keyboard being broken.
Yeah, sure.
That does sound like a keyboard thing.
That's kind of a separate issue. I actually wish this game didn't have the ability to grab onto walls at all. I feel like it would be better if there was less stuff in this game.
That sounds like it's not
climbing.
a mountain climbing game anymore. But
well, you're still going up the mountain. You're just wall jumping and dashing up the mountain instead of literally holding on.
Generally, the grabbing isn't really necessary in many places. Like you can get by without it.
80% of the time you're using it, it's because you need like 2 seconds before you launch into the next round of
you just need a break.
Just take a breather. Exactly. Yeah.
Which is good, obviously. Yeah. But I feel if I had one less button to press, I would have enjoyed this game a lot more.
I just find that weird because I like, aside from the analog stick problems, which we've sort of touched on, but like when I was using the D-pad, it was very much not I was pushing the wrong buttons. It was, I might fuck up the timing of some advanced technique like a wave dash, which is just, it's meant to be a tough technique.
Yeah.
Like I didn't find myself dashing in the wrong directions or at the wrong times. So I find it interesting. Oh yeah, I wish you'd give it a chance on a controller. I'd love to see how you go after like an hour on a controller.
I wonder.
Oh, sorry, you go.
No, I probably will. Is what I was going to say. I mean, I'm probably going to give this game a bit more exploration, so we'll see.
All I really have to add here is that I think Celeste doesn't have. It's not a physics-based platformer, from what I can tell. I saw people talking about this. When you let go of the controls, you move a couple of pixels, still depending on momentum, but you very quickly stop. It is very precise, the controls, and I actually think the controls are great. It's just sometimes the level design is even more precise. And it can cause a lot of issues until you're really, really comfortable. There's a moment in the last screen of Farewell where you're sort of like riding jellyfish and then killing the jellyfish and then kind of falling and grabbing the next jellyfish. And I died so many times there because I just couldn't figure out a way to precisely, I'm not sure exactly what I'm saying, but once you let go of the right button or D or whatever, you stop moving quite quickly and precisely maneuvering my jumps or my fall on my path to coincide with the next target or crystal or whatever. I did find that a little difficult at times. But I think that's just one of the things the game expects you to learn, honestly. I don't think that's an excuse. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing, but it does. The whole game feels really intentional, especially the controls. I think they actually posted the player code a while back, and it's a bit messy, but it's really. I don't know. I've used it as a reference.
So
I think the way they set this all up is just incredible. I think the controls feel amazing.
I think. Sorry. I think like another part is. Or something that surprised me was often I would get to a room and I'd like look at it and be like, oh god, I have to do this. Like, you get to like one of the chapter 7 ones where you've got to like dash, hit a green crystal, dash sideways, hit another green crystal, dash upwards.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh my god, this is going to be impossible. And it would actually like, I'd get it in 1 to 2 goes. And it was because the level design was that tight to like the distance of the dash, and maybe this is a side effect of me mostly playing Mario Maker, which is levels by creators who don't know what the fuck they're doing, but like play a level where I would just be like, oh, that's going to be really hard and tight to pull off, and then sometimes it just actually flowed really well, and you'd get into this groove. Like that was like often the highlight of the game for me is the bits that looked really hard, and then when I actually sat down to do it, it was like, oh no, this flows very well.
Yeah. I don't think the controls are flawless, and I'm not going to argue if anyone says they found them too difficult to persist with. Personally, I found them working really well for me, and whenever I died, it always felt like bullshit for a moment, and then I realized I was actually holding the wrong direction that whole time. It's more obvious on a keyboard, I guess. I think it worked well for me, but yeah, like I said, I wouldn't argue if anyone says it was uncomfortable or unfamiliar. That's all I really got.
Yeah. Well, Ruben, this next slide is yours as well.
Yes, it is. It's kind of segueing. These are comments from a YouTube walkthrough to explain how to get the Crystal Heart in World 2, which is the one where you have to learn that there's some random mechanic that you, of course, will never use in other than one other specific spot, and that is never taught to you. We have to go back and forth through screens.
So it's actually very useful in some of the later post-game levels.
It is, and it's a very common speedrun technique. But
yes. But I don't know. Just like some of the things in this game, I just felt were kind of leave it out, leave it on the cutting room floor.
There's definitely a few strawberries where like I had to use a guide for about 10 of the probably more like it was about half the strawberries in chapter 8, which there's only 5, but like there were a few strawberries, and like I'd use a guide for them, and I'd get
those were impossible.
Yeah, I was like I just couldn't have figured that out myself. There's no way that would have happened.
I think the game isn't as explicit as I wish it was about this, but from what I can tell, the design ethos really seems to be that you should just play the level and then come back and get the collectibles later if you want, because then you unlock the little bar at the bottom of the pause screen that's like, here's the ones you've collected, here's the ones you're missing, here are the ones you've collected this run through. It makes it so much easier to track down strawberries.
Yes, for sure.
The Crystal Hearts, most players who don't use a walkthrough or aren't in your Discord probably wouldn't know about them until 4, basically. And at that point, you suddenly realize there is a whole other third kind of collectible.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who made it to chapter 8 and they got to the heart gate and they're like, what the hell's a heart?
Like, once you wake up in level 2, it's there is a way to see the heart, and it's sealed off, and there's a little hint about how to get there.
So yeah, I saw that, right? And I mean, I spent, after I beat the level, I came back and spent maybe half an hour trying to get the heart before just giving up, and then later came back to it, spent another time before again giving up, and then finally asking for a hint and getting a hint that indicated to me I could refresh my dash and use that to kind of infinitely climb between screens.
I think it's a great puzzle. I can understand why no one would figure it out by themselves, but I think it's a great puzzle. I wish I'd figured it out by myself, and I'm not sure how long it would have taken me. But
yeah, I don't think I ever would have gotten there. But like people in the chat are bringing up like the one that we already touched on, the one in 4A, where you've got to like sit on the white block, and because like that was one I found that white block, and I like tried dashing into it and everything, and nothing worked. So I was like, okay, and then looked up a guide, and it was just like, okay, well, how was I meant to?
That one, I'm so proud of myself for getting that one, because I immediately saw it and thought, oh, I bet I have to hold down on that block for a while.
Yeah.
And then I did, and it worked, and it was great.
And I mean, that is great if you've played the game.
I know. But it is another example of when this game, I don't know. I mean, it is the design philosophy of letting some of the things be obtuse, right? And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's coming from, you mentioned how Maddie's been playing a lot of Kaizo Mario stuff, and I think it's kind of similar to this vibe of like, you're choosing to engage with my game, therefore I get to dictate the terms around it, and I determine that you're going to struggle with these things, which is fine, but I don't know.
I think
it rubbed me the wrong way.
This is one of the most fair games I've played, I think. Genuinely, like, it asked a lot of me, but if I was able to match that, I think it was consistently. Like, it does remind me of Dark Souls in a way that Dark Souls did feel like a fair game, but there was still a lot of bullshit in there.
Yes.
Just like incredibly unfair deaths. And that's part of the fairness. I guess maybe I'm using very imprecise words here. I don't know. But Celeste consistently, there were never any deaths that felt unfair. Like when I died, it was 100% my fault.
I agree.
There are a few screens that I really made me doubt that opinion just a tiny bit. I think 7C in particular is just awful. But at the same time, you know, like I can recognize that that level wasn't fully designed for me in the same way that Farewell probably wasn't quite either.
So it's interesting because like Dark Souls to me is my go-to example of a game that is unfair, like to how I'd use the term, because there was a lot of bullshit that they kind of threw at you that you had no chance to understand or react to when they threw it at you.
Right, but the dying is the gameplay mechanic, right? Like that
Yeah.
is the central gameplay mechanic, and it's not even the dying necessarily. Like if you just teleported back like 30 seconds, it would function the same way. The whole point there is trial and error.
Yeah.
Like the way the hollow work. From what I remember, those are meant to represent players who kind of lose that determination and give up. And like the whole point of that game is just like stubborn, like reckless stubbornness, honestly, in the face of incredibly unfair odds. But because you have that ability to keep going and just like outlast and eventually like beat this, that sort of counterbalances out the unfairness. Like you get unlimited tries at this. As long as you are willing to put in the work, you will beat this eventually. And I think that's what I think Celeste has a similar design ethos. Yeah.
For me, the hugest difference would be Dark Souls was often sending me back 10 minutes. Celeste is never sending me back more than 20 seconds, with few exceptions.
Yes. Farewell would be the one. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
But yeah, no, I kind of like to go back to like the collectibles. I'm okay with like all of the hearts being kind of ridiculous because you sort of establish that as the pattern with the hearts. You say all of the hearts are kind of bullshit. Like, you know, the heart in 1A is just like this weird puzzle that has nothing to do with anything else that happens in the game. The one in 2A requires like 3 logical leaps to get to. That one in 4A is a reference to a game you may not have played.
Yes.
It was more the berries that I felt were unreasonable were the ones that I was like, why is this here? Like 90% of the berries were accessible, and then there were just a few where when I looked up the guide, I was just like, I don't know how you meant to figure that out. And it's like, those are what I tweet, because you establish the berries as something you can get. Like they're meant to be collectibles you go and find, and then when you make them very hard to do without it felt unfair.
Someone in the Discord did get all of the red berries without looking up or walk through. Like it is absolutely possible. And the game gives you hints in that direction. I think it's all fair and reasonable for me personally, including the Goldens. It's just, you know, if I'm thinking about this in terms of like the game is asking a particular level of stubbornness and dedication and skill from me, and if I'm willing to match that, then it will be fair and let me continue. I just can't keep giving my time and stress and energy to those golden berries. I got the one in the first level. And sorry, to be clear, the goldens are a little reward you get once you beat the game if you go back and replay a level and finish it without dying. Which is very easy for first level. And then the farewell is maybe just I have nightmares about even attempting it.
The craziest part, sorry, I guess this is a spoiler for the end of Farewell for anyone who's not aware, but Farewell has an extra screen at the end if you still have the golden strawberry.
Yeah.
That if you die, it sends you right back to the start of the level.
And it's not a difficult room compared to what you've just been through. It's actually really easy. I haven't played it, but like I can tell it would be fine. It's just the nerves of that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just going to shatter your confidence. And I've absolutely, I think the first person who got there just died very quickly because of the surprise and the
Yeah, and like just being asked to sight read at that point is just
right.
even if it's not that hard, it's just like, oh fuck you.
Yeah, it's
monstrous.
just evil.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess speaking of Farewell, so the next side's actually on Farewell, just because
All right, I'll just sit back and relax.
I think one of the big reasons I really wanted to talk about Farewell specifically, was just because it is this story that felt more like a sequel to me than an epilogue in the way that it feels like it challenges what the actual game was talking about in a cool way.
I'm seeing so many things that I just don't recognize.
Like so in
This next bit is
in Celeste, like the story is basically Maddie's determination and stuff is a good thing. And I feel like Farewell really challenges that in a neat way. Like Farewell is like Madeline
sure.
hurting herself with her like bullheadedness to the point where like Madeline is the good guy.
That's a really good point, actually. I hadn't thought about it like that.
I just really like that as an extension of what the game was talking about, because it's sort of it presents itself as a game of, oh, if you just push through, and you're determined, that's always a good thing. And then Farewell goes, but I mean, do be careful that you're not just being an idiot.
I think. So for me, the core narrative is about when I first played it, I read it as a mental illness allegory. Basically, just that there is this part of you that is holding you back out of fear and trauma, and that like constantly fighting it and trying to erase it and destroy it is just going to feed into that fear and make things harder. And only by like offering that like compassion are you going to be able to embrace that part of you that isn't like a necessary part of you. And kind of get further. And I think it feels like a really logical extension of how the game ended. Because it does kind of end with a happily ever after. That's often not the case for mental illness. Like these things do relapse and recur, and I don't know. I think like Maddie's stubborn-headedness is absolutely like one of her defining traits, and it's what lets her really like climb that mountain in the first place. But I think in Farewell, what it does is it feeds into her tendency to isolate and like avoid actually asking for help. Like the end of 6A involves Maddie like basically like accepting the part of her that is a metaphor for whatever it is. You can sort of figure that out yourselves. But I don't know if I'd explicitly call it her asking for help, but it's certainly not her isolating herself. Whereas I think this messes me up. This next bit. I don't know. I definitely think I think you're right.
Yeah, I like that. Like if you focus on sort of Madeline and Madeline's growth, like it is an extension of that as well, because it is the two of them. Sort of reversing roles a bit, because like Madeline is actually or hurting herself through her actions.
Oh, it's 100%, and like like I totally understand why it's happening. Like the guilt that drives it is completely and utterly like relatable and understandable. But at a certain point, it's becoming like it's self-harm, really. I think so. Yeah. And I think that I don't know if it's acceptance necessary. It's letting go. Like I should have posted it in the Discord, but there is oh my god, wait, he has a jellyfish here still? That is
I know.
I do not understand this game.
Don't get distracted.
This is not meant to have a jellyfish here.
Watching this run is just insane.
Yeah.
Wait, there's a car? What the fuck? This
idea.
game's crazy, guys.
I had no idea that was there. But yeah, no, yeah. I mean, yeah. Obviously, I think we've touched on this plenty, so I'll skip over what the end of chapter 9 slide was meant to be, which is just this level is just sadistic in what it makes you do. Like,
It is.
this isn't even the hard part yet.
Oh god, no. It gets so
This
much
isn't
worse.
the hard part, Jesus.
No, of course not. There's a lot the game does to really, really get you in Maddie's headspace of like determination and frustration here.
Yeah.
It does it really well. I died over 6,000 times. Like, I fell for it hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, that hurts.
I'm a fool. But final, like, the realization of what's really happening here, and I think throwing that jellyfish, Maddie's talked, I guess neither of you played it, but there's the final screen of Farewell is like 90 seconds, 2 minutes long, and it's not nearly as difficult as everything else you've been through, but it's an endurance run. It's exhausting. And the first bit is just kind of standard like jellyfish gliding around like this, and then you catch an updraft, you have to navigate a bunch of things, and then you have to like throw the jellyfish off into the electricity to hit switch, and from there you're kind of on your own. And you have to just like fall and dash, and it's all just like twitch reflexes trying to get to the end. And Maddie's described that as that final act of like throwing the jellyfish is just like kind of, I guess, acceptance. It's like this is it. I'm letting go. I need to like move on and get out of here. I think it just works phenomenally. Like I felt such pride and relief and just like a lot of emotions finishing Farewell. The Moonberry was a different story, but actually finishing this game, it felt incredible. Yeah, and I just think they did an amazing job with the it's a PowerPoint. Yeah, they did an amazing job.
I need to go and finish chapter 9. Oh, the wave dash.
You really should. Like, if you can. It's not. We're starting to see the more difficult stuff here, and it really adds up. Like, this is the secret dash technique. You have to. It's a diagonal down dash followed by a precisely timed jump, and it doesn't sound so bad, but getting 3 in a row like that is just impossible. Yeah.
I love how it's combined with the corner bounces so quickly too. It's so unnecessarily mean.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah. But I saw someone say, like, if you can beat those tutorial screens at all ever, you will be able to beat the rest of Farewell. Like, it might take you 10 years, but if you have those skills, the rest of Farewell is just applying them consistently and precisely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good way of putting it. Like, the game isn't... These aren't easy techniques, but the game isn't asking for more than what you've already demonstrated you can do. It's maybe in a new way, or it's maybe a little faster or a little more precise, but yeah, I think the game is not necessarily fair in what it asks, but it's definitely consistent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, so moving on. This was another use side, I think, Ruben. Come on. Are you muted, Ruben?
Oh, sorry. I am. Just something that I want to call out, which I thought was awesome. And I feel like we say this every game club, but it's true every game club, which is the community adds so many aspects to this game. So this is from a countdown that happened from a stream, one of the community members streaming today. And there was one that happened when I did my stream, and it's all the time. For the final bit of Celeste in the main story, in case you don't know, there are on-screen countdowns, the countdown from 30 to 0, obviously, as you reach the top of the mountain. And the vibe of the entire community being there, cheering you on for completing this game, counting down with the game, it just really made these moments land so well.
Yeah, they act as little, like, waypoints or check markers. They're physical objects within the game. It's a countdown from... I don't know exactly what it represents in mountain climbing, but it's how far you are from the peak.
Yeah, I love it in the game, because it's when you hit the top and it's like it hits you with the 30 and then the 29. You're like, oh shit, like I'm coming up on the
Oh,
top
it's fantastic. And
and
the energy in the room of like
yeah.
games done quick whenever they hit that point is just like incredible. I mentioned getting over it with Ben Potty before, and I think that's a good point of comparison because it is a semi-fair, very difficult game about climbing things. There are a lot of differences. There is no checkpoint system there, but I think I could have finished that game if I was invested in it. If I'd had all of those emotions gone through a story ahead of time, I would have been able to do it. I'm sure of it. But as it is, I just kind of bounced off it. And the story here, like the characters, the emotions, it does an incredible job. It's not a complicated story. It's shorter than I remember when I went back through it and played it. But yeah, no, I mean, just like what it does to people and the energy it generates, I think it's pretty evident. It does a great fucking job with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, yeah, as Ruben said, like the countdown in Celeste is just enhanced by the community getting involved. Like this
100%.
trend
so much.
that started years ago of everyone yelling out as you hit the checkpoints just really takes what Celeste is giving you with the checkpoints and drives it up to 11.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Should I talk about the metaphor? Like, where am I going to discuss that article? I guess is the question.
Well, our next slide. So the slide I've actually just started on the story. Actually seems like a perfect time for us to dive into that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I'm a trans girl. I'm figured that out September last year. Even though I've been on hormones for like 6 months. Don't do the maths on that; it will confuse you. I'm a mess of a person. When I first played this game, I read it as a metaphor for like self-acceptance and depression and anxiety specifically, because that is what is literally depicted within the game. But there's a lot more going on there, and Maddie Thorson, who they go by they them. They are trans, and they sort of figure that out in the process of making Farewell, I think they said.
Yeah, I think that's what the article says.
Yeah, they released a long post on Medium, basically explaining that yes, like the main character of the story is trans, and that Maddie didn't realize this. I mean, also to be clear, they have the same names. Like there were a few hints here and there. Maybe something was going on, but yeah, the designer didn't realize at the time that the character was that this was a metaphor for transness. But like in hindsight, there's nothing else it could have been. And playing through, there's a lot of stuff about mirrors and body image and revulsion that really like is very recognizably like the trans experience. I don't know. I made a short narrative game that I very embarrassingly put on the mixtape just because it so closely mirrors Maddie's experience here. When I first wrote it, I had no idea that it was about like transness and that particular kind of self-acceptance. But looking back, there's nothing else it really could have been. I don't know. I definitely really resonated with that article. Just this because I do still think it exists as a metaphor for anxiety and depression. Just like accepting that like terrified, fearful part of yourself, but at the same time, like accepting that you're trans does require confronting some pretty fucking terrified things. And from what I've seen in myself and other people, the part that really tends to hold you back is that fear that really Bedouin represents. It's like this, I need to keep us safe. It's terrifying. Like, obviously this is self-destructive, but the alternative is so much scarier that I need to keep us safe. And yeah, I guess that really resonated with me. I wish I'd planned out anything at all to say here, but I really love what this game did with that.
Yeah,
I think it's kind of fantastic.
I think it's a testament to its strength as well. Like as a cis person, I very much got emotionally invested and connected with it. As you said,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
when I first played it years ago, I sort of took it as just a sort of mental illness or acceptance metaphor. And
Mhm.
now we sort of know it's more specific, but I guess that's like a sort of testament to the universality of some of that experience. Like I like that it's both distinctly a trans narrative, but also something that speaks to everyone, and because I feel like that brings it all together a bit is a sort of like
Yeah, I think
we
so.
are
And
all people.
I think that's probably a byproduct of like what I imagine happened was that Maddie set out to write a somewhat personal story about mental health, and
Mm.
they accidentally included just like a bunch of trans stuff. And it wasn't until after that they sort of figured out like what was going on, and that yes, this is an incredibly blatant trans metaphor when you know what to look for. Um, I've heard people disagree that this stuff's present, but I mean I don't know.
Well, time sure showed them, I think, with this game.
A little bit, a little bit. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, yeah, this is a really personal game to the people who created it. I know Maddie Smallin's the composer too, and I should mention that Lena Raine is absolutely incredible, and the music here is just amazing.
Did we have a music slider? Well, no, we don't. The
Oh, we
music
don't.
bops in this game.
It's
Music is great.
incredible, and listening to it in a video or on Spotify doesn't even really even close to do it justice. It's absolutely amazing. Yeah.
Quick other side
Playing
note
a
on the
game
music.
and the sound design is just fantastic. Yeah.
Inspired
Um,
choice to get other people to like do the B-sides as well.
oh
I
yeah,
really
because
like that as an idea.
yeah, they got all of each level's theme was remixed by like a guest artist for the B and C side.
Yeah,
And
such a cool idea.
it's really cool. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Especially with the whole cassette thing. I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what really to add here. Just that I love this game a lot, and it's obviously a very personal experience to the creators, but it also seems pretty universally relatable.
I think that the personal side of that that you touched on is why I think it works so well, because it's so
It's authentic. Yeah,
like and
100%.
that the fact that it mattered to the people making it is what makes it so like
Because
work so well.
it is a simple narrative. It's like it's a stock climbing the mountain overcoming thing. There's like I mean it's like Save the Cat, Blake Snyder, like formulaic nonsense, honestly. But it really does work. And I think part of that is how the story is told. I think part of that is like how it marries gameplay with story. And I think probably the biggest part is just like how authentic and sincere it all feels.
Yeah, I wonder how much the context of, because obviously I think all three of us, I mean, I know I definitely did, kind of knew going into this game that I had already read the article that Maddie had written before I went into the game, right? And I wonder how this narrative reads when you don't have that context. But I'm assuming it's still.
Yeah, I mean, so I played the game like
right
2 years ago.
I did too, yeah.
And I mean, admittedly, I was just a bit ignorant about a lot of this stuff back then as well, so it completely went over my head.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Interesting.
It sounds like it went over Maddie's head too as well, so I don't feel too
bad about it. That's reassuring to me. It makes me feel a little better.
So people bringing up the backwards track in, I think it's chapter 5.
Yeah, that's one of the. I wish I'd heard that, or I knew for sure this was a trans metaphor, because that is really something. In the Mirror Temple, which is about reflections and mirrors, there's if you play the music backwards, there's a spoken word track basically about like body image and reflections, and it sure is I don't know what to say. It's heartbreaking. Yeah, it's really candid. Is this one of you playing? I've got so many words. Oh
this
god, all right.
This was me. Yeah.
This goes on for a while.
Just lowering my expectations.
I was trying to figure out how these things worked, right? I mean, it was obviously you could bounce across from, and I didn't know that you swapped from hot to cold.
Yeah,
he
hasn't encountered the cold yet.
Oh, okay, that makes some amount of sense, I guess.
Yeah, I think I was in the chat for this part telling Ruben he almost had it, so I am partially to blame.
Yeah,
for
you're
how long it goes
responsible.
on for. Yeah, no, like I think part of that works as well. Like just sort of going back to that track. Like I am not trans, but I also don't like my body. So a lot of those parts still very much resonate with me. Like a lot of the mirror image.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like maybe not in exactly the same way, but like it certainly still hits something for me.
I mean, I can personally say that like I thought for the longest time that I was just like a deeply insecure boy. That like if I'd heard that, I would have resonated with it a lot and been like, yeah, that's insecurity. That's just like how it is being a boy who doesn't like his body. Oh god, all right, you've moved on to that route. That is a relief.
The gameplay is really distracting from the serious topics you're talking about.
A tiny bit, yeah. I'm gonna scroll down. Yeah, all I can say is shit's hard as a boy. Like I guess I never really was one. I lived as a closeted trans girl, but at the same time, like I do think I shared a lot of experiences with cis boys, and I think like it's really hard not feeling supported, not feeling like you're allowed to be insecure in your body, but at the same time, just that like that level of insecurity is just like omnipresent and crushing. What I will say is, I think if you really have issues with like mirrors and having your picture taken, think about it, find someone to talk to about gender and stuff. Like it's not the only possible explanation, but it is, I generally think, one worth considering.
Yeah, I think yes, more people need to explore these issues.
Yeah,
just
like
in general, as a blanket rule.
the number of people I've talked to who have been like, yeah, no, this is normal insecurity. Like, I'm just like traumatized. I have issues with masculinity, and then end up coming up as a trans girl. I really don't want to make it seem like that's the secret answer for everyone. I don't want to make it seem like it's impossible to be like have these feelings as boy, because absolutely like you can and many people will, but it's worth thinking about. I'm much cuter now than I was 6 months ago. It's made me so much happier, and it's kind of genuinely worth considering. Yeah, that's all I'm throwing out there.
I think we'll almost certainly re-hit some of these notes as we go through the mixtape as well, because I know I have stuff to say about this when we get to If Found. But I mean, it's worth
no, you're right. That's actually the next slide. So I have one more thing to say on Celeste, but unless anyone else. So this is technically the story slide, even though ironically we're watching chapter 8.
The least story of all.
But I wanted to point out, I find it interesting that in Celeste, I'd say 70% of the game is post game content.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I think I beat the game in probably, it wouldn't be more than 10 hours, and I'm now at like 60. I don't think that's an accurate number, like I said, but there you go. Now you got it.
Hey, we figured it out.
Almost.
But yeah,
absolutely.
I just find it very interesting that like because I just like taking a step back and looking at decisions like that. Like you can tell, I think that was a decision that was inspired by the fact that Maddie wanted to go ham on the difficulty, but she also they also wanted people to
I mean, all I can really add is that I'm really glad Farewell had a story, and I'm really glad it was a good story. But yeah, generally, mostly, I don't think I would have stuck with the Seasides unless I knew there was something narrative locked behind them. I did think for the longest time that I had to beat all the Seasides to finish Farewell.
Oh yes, that was a very funny moment in the Discord.
Yeah, I learned that at the Floodgate in Farewell, so that was a learning experience. But
well, I would even go further than that and say I doubt I would have completed even the first 8 hours of this game if the story wasn't so compelling and so emotionally resonant, right? Like genuinely, I mean, I touched on the parts that I didn't like about some of the controls and stuff. I
Mhm.
enjoyed the game overall, definitely, but the majority of that was this story is just so compelling and so engaging and funny and touches your heart and your soul. Like, it really just is a great narrative experience wrapped
I'm
around
gonna
a brilliant gameplay experience.
I'm gonna say something really controversial here. I think that 90% of why I love this game so much is the last level. I think like the story before that is cool and fun, but compared to some of the other games I played for this month, like it would have even come close to ranking unless it was like that final that final level, like the
Yeah.
climax there is just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Farewell has. I think Farewell works so well because it happens after the main story too, though. Like I think
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah. No,
challenging,
100%.
challenging what the game was saying. But
Yeah.
Well,
I really
I
like
haven't seen the story for Farewell, and I still think this game is great.
So we got some comments from Wildbow that I just wanted to call out because I think he's making a really good point, which is
That's
that
probably true.
a huge thing that Celeste does so well is integrating all the various aspects, or making them work off each other. So like the
Yeah.
music works with the gameplay, works with the level design, which all tie into the emotions that a particular segment is going for.
Yeah, 100%.
Like I think that's a really good point, and Wildbow specifically calls out that most AAA games don't quite do this as well, and I think he's right.
I mean, I don't
Um,
think they can. I think the level of like internal consistency that's required for something to be this cohesive really only functions well when you've got one vision at the helm, right?
I've heard God
And
of War for the PS4
I
is
haven't played that actually.
similar-ish, but like
And
that's what I've heard of it as, like the AAA game that tells a deeply emotional and personal story.
yeah,
I
I should
would.
clarify also, sorry, I've never like worked in a major game studio. I just have a number of connections who have. I know some amount about the industry that I think somewhat conclusively say that. Like
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I would compare it. Maybe a fair comparison is another game we did for the Game Club during the Aussie 3-pack, which was Florence, right? Where something that we really liked about this game was the mechanical interactions of the game tied in so well, at least on a interaction by interaction level, to what was happening in the story, right? And obviously, this game has some stuff that's kind of like that with something like the feather sequences, right? Which I think back that up really well. But also just on a kind of holistic level, the entire game is that, right? Everything that happens in this game is happening because of the narrative and the goal of the emotional payload that the game is trying to convey, which I think
100%.
it's just so cohesive.
It's a story first game. Like every single element of this is in subs of the story. I mean, maybe I say that, but then at the same time, like the seasides feel very similar in design and devoid of narrative.
I guess I'm mainly talking about the first 10-hour experience.
Yeah. No, I think this game is just masterful in what it managed. And I love it a lot. Yeah.
I agree.
Do we have anything else we want to say about it before we move on to some of the mixtape tracks?
Maddie Thorson, I love you, but you're evil.
What is that? Oh,
like
sorry, I thought it was like a quote from something.
No.
Rather than just a general sentiment.
No, that's just my general, like, this is a fantastic game, but also you're evil.
I think that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, okay, well, shall we move on to just quickly touching on some of the mixtape stuff?
Yeah, let's bring it.
So the first game that we've sort of given its own slide, because I think we all loved it, was If Found.
Yeah.
How should we do these mixtape games? Should we just give kind of a brief summary of what the game is?
I think it's probably safe to assume that the majority of people probably haven't played them. So
you really should play this game, folks.
Yeah.
In fact, I will say, if you haven't played this game, we will spoil it to an extent that I'm uncomfortable with. You should leave and go play this game, and then come back and catch us later. Because
it's fantastic.
Yeah,
I think it's
incredible.
What it does in terms of, because we know The Devil is a very standard visual novel. Like it's very very like mechanically, structurally, like the way
It's a
everything
visual
is
novel
designed.
for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Like
This is a lot more like Florence.
essentially,
It's an
this
interactive
is.
story.
I haven't played Florence, but this felt like the highest like production value visual novel I've ever played.
Mm.
It's really, really cool what they pulled off here. The constant sequence, particularly, was just so well done. It felt like that the intro credits to Scott Pilgrim.
God,
Like
yeah.
I loved yeah, no, I really, really loved what they did here.
I think this is such a great example of, and again, what I thought Florence was great at, which is like you can tell stories in cooler ways in games because like just make me do something like what's happening on screen now. Like Ruben is having to reveal the next part of it by rubbing stuff out. Like it's just
erasing stuff for
yeah.
the non-Australians in the room.
Oh yes. Like yeah,
Classic.
just having to involve you in the story like that, particularly the segments that we're not showing right now, but the ones where it's like the diary entries, and you are like
so
erasing those
so
as you come to accept them. Like is just
I don't know if it's acceptance even. I mean, okay. Yeah, so the conceit of this game is that you have a diary and that you're erasing it. And it starts like messing with that formula as you go ahead. Yeah, like there's a lot of it took me a second to catch on to what they were doing, but yeah, there's layers, like literally like Photoshop layers
yeah.
on this diary, and you first start by erasing the like the scribbled out faces and words, the things that are like too difficult or dramatic to accept, and then you are literally erasing the diary itself.
Yeah, you're erasing everything.
Yeah, and I'm honestly reluctant to spoil the direction it heads in, but I think it it really works really well.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to spoil it because I want to talk about the ending.
All right,
But just
I'm
the
sorry.
way it makes you do the things, I just want to call that out as something that games can do that other mediums can't. Like the fact that I was having to physically erase those faces, those bits of text, it just psychologically makes it impact you more because you're not just watching it happen, you're doing it.
Yeah,
and this game uses that idea to such its own strength.
This game is so beautiful. It feels very. What I always think about is Spec Ops: The Line. For those who haven't played it, there's a moment where you basically just have to commit a war crime, and it's framed in a very like, yeah, hell yeah, Call of Duty, let's do this way. But even if you cotton on, even if you figure out what's going on, you still have to do this thing to progress in the game. The same thing happened with the Prince of Persia reboot from 2008. I think at the very end of the game, you have to do something that's just like terrible and undoes everything you've managed. And I remember there being discussions. I think one of the designers or someone on that game or someone on Spec Ops: The Line was basically like you could just turn off the game at any point. You could disengage from this terrible thing. Like you don't have to continue the narrative. And I don't know how I feel about that. I disagree with it for many reasons, but I was thinking about that a lot as I played this, that like what is happening here, feeling more complicit in is fucking difficult. Yeah.
And this is one of the games that makes me feel complicit in the unraveling of the story the most, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Let's get to it, right? There's another layer that we haven't touched on for this game, which is the like space layer, right?
Yes.
Which I don't even know what to say about it other than it ratchets up the tension of what is happening in this game to such a major degree.
Yeah.
Like, oh my god.
Especially as in your head you're trying to connect the two.
Yes,
as it's
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's magical realism, and I am almost reluctant to speculate on how much was real, how much was.
I think we shouldn't at all.
Yeah. I think my preference in my own writing is just let things exist both as metaphorical and also literal at the same time.
Yes.
I think they did a really great job of doing that. I think the fact that the astronaut's called Cassiopeia and the main character is called Cassio. Like I think there's an absolutely deliberate connection there.
Yes, and the cosmonaut Leia, I guess we'll call it, is explicitly hinting at the end of an end of world event and we're getting into spoilers here. So again, leave now, please, if you haven't tried this game. Obviously, as the story of Cassio progresses, it is a story of somebody's life falling apart more and more, right? You can't help but, as you start to reconcile these two distinct things, see that it's pointing in one direction, which is this is the end of Cassio's life.
If not death, then destruction, in whatever form that takes.
Well, yes, and that's, I guess, the ultimate end. I definitely, as I played through the game, sorry, I'm just going to say one more time. Yeah. Please leave this game if you haven't experienced it, because genuinely, with all my heart, this is maybe the most emotional connection I've had to a game in like 5 or 6 years.
Also, play We Know the Devil, because that's honestly, I love it a lot, and I'm gonna have to yell at these two about how they played it.
I mean, we'll get into that soon.
Yes, we will.
This game leads you down the path of, at least for me, my reaction was, oh, this game is ending with Cassio's death. Right, that's where it felt, and it ends with the rebuilding of this, with Cassio's life falling apart, but then at this lowest point, finally being able to kind of break through that, and it is. Yeah. I cried what I think were about 60% tears of relief and 40% tears of joy when that happened. Right, and if you go and watch this video, you'll hear me falling apart and struggling to continue to engage with the game as this happens.
And here you can see all sort of the regret and struggles of the Barry.
Let's bring it all back.
I think I used the word destruction, and I think that was really intentional, because it is destructive. Like, it is her life falling apart, and it's a rebirth in a way, but at that point it is still like absolutely, she's not dead. To be very, very clear, I have talked to the writer of this game and been given permission to yell at anyone who suggests that. But there is a sort of death that happens there. It's more on a metaphorical level. I just played this last night. I finished it at like 3 a.m. and I'm still sort of processing it. I don't
death in the tarot sense, not to jump into some of the other games we're going to get into.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Honestly, now that you mention it, it reminds me a lot of Freya's Power Trilogy, which I will get to. I absolutely adore those games. But yeah, I don't know how much more I have to add here, other than this was a phenomenal visual novel. It was a phenomenal story. I loved it a lot. Yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Fuck Fergal.
Yeah, fuck him.
Fuck Fergal. Yeah. When we first met him, I thought, okay, I'm excited to see how this gets repaired. And then by the end of the game, I mean, not even by the end, but every time you meet him, it's just fuck Fergal. Every time, louder and louder.
Great game.
Absolutely fucking hilarious to me that it ends with a pit crew. Like, I don't know if that was.
Well, can I talk about this? Because this is something I want to talk about as well.
Yeah.
Genuinely, the emotional kind of epilogue to this game, where you get a new diary and you start to fill it out, right? And it ends with a character creator, a pit crew, like you said, right? Where you get to build this character for yourself. And I don't know, I mean, I guess it's appropriate that we're getting into questions of gender identity on this episode of the Game Club. But you guys were, Elliot, you were kind of talking about like struggling with identity, and obviously that's something that I've had as well, as somebody who is not especially masculine, I would say, or like traditionally masculine, I guess.
Right.
Toxically masculine, maybe is the
you can frame it however you want. I get you.
I think I've never had an experience with a character creator where I've by default created a non-male character that felt like an expression of myself. And this was the first game where I've ever had that experience. And I didn't think, oh, let me try doing that, especially for this game. It just, I mean, I don't even know fully what it was. I think it was just the fact that we'd been playing through so many games that were giving different experiences of trans narratives, that I felt that I just kind of by default was like, well, let's just do this. I mean, an expression of my identity could be male or could be androgynous or could be female. It doesn't necessarily have to present explicitly masculine. And I think that demonstrates the strength of what we're trying to do here with exploring different types of narratives. In that, I think the word normalizes maybe has some baggage to suggest that it's abnormal, but like allows you to have these experiences that you can kind of relate to.
I think like it shouldn't be abnormal, but for most people it is. Like
yeah,
maybe that's the right way to put it. It made it more accessible for me to explore gender identity questions, and I think that's very powerful and a reason.
Really interesting. That's really cool.
I think that's how it should be.
Exactly.
And sorry, just to fill anyone in on the joke. There's a website called Picru that is really popular with trans people. It's basically just like a create your own like icon or whatever. If you go on there, I'm sure you'll recognize like a bunch of people on Twitter have these icons on the Doof Discord especially. And it's I think particularly popular because it lets people create a version of themselves that is like a little bit outside of the boundaries that they're familiar with. It's it's fictionalized and it's an art style that isn't usually very realistic. And I think just a lot of people that level of abstraction lets people engage with ideas and exploration that they otherwise might not be able to. And I think that's one of the strengths of Picru, and also one of the strengths of stories in general, and these stories in particular.
Wait, to launch off what Ruben said before, because I've only just sort of processed that this is what I did as he said it. Like in the character creator at the end of If Found, I made like a female version of me. I've never done that before in a character creator. I usually go weird in character creators in games. I make like robots or something like as wild as possible, like that would belong on Monster Factory. Whereas for this one, I just instinctively made a female version of myself. And
that's so fascinating to me that's a more ubiquitous experience, because this game, like, it's a strength of how much you connect with this narrative, how much I felt this narrative as I was playing it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. Y'all should find therapists who specialize in this stuff. But also, no, I totally know what you mean. Like, it's a testament to how well told the story is and accomplished. Yeah.
This game's just it's just well made, just really well made. I guess a small example that I point to as well is you get letters from your mother, 2 or 3 throughout the course of this story, and she never addresses you by name. It's always my child at the top. And I only noticed this on the 3rd letter, or the 2nd or 3rd letter, and it stood out to me so strongly. And then, of course, you finally get some resolution of that. And it's a perfect example of just a very small, very tactile thing that this story does that makes it hit home so strongly.
I was really thinking about that a lot when I played this. Another game that I haven't played but I do know of, the Red Strings Club by Deconstruct Team. It has at least one trans creator behind it, I think a couple, and it does delve into trans issues, and at some point in that game you have to dead name a person, like fill in a password that has that person's dead name to progress, from what I've heard. And there was a bit of a hubbub about this, but it was like it was defended as like an intentional decision, like that is what the narrative needed. I can't speak to whether or not that's true. I haven't played it, but I was really expecting at least the climax of this to involve dead naming to some degree.
Yes.
Especially with things being scribbled out, I thought there was going to be something that I wasn't able to erase, or just like erased all in one go instead of just first the scribble and then the word. It did feel like a really intentional decision, not including a birth name in here. And
I agree. I think it was great. I think
it's probably the best. Yeah.
I also was kind of expecting, because it is, I mean, tangibly, this game is about kind of erasing your past, your unhappy past, right? The unhappy you of the past, right? And
It isn't. It
Yeah.
isn't. Like I think framing it that way makes it sound like you are coming to terms with what happened.
True.
I think, for me at least, the erasing and the burning of the diary felt um, like this is never going to be resolved. Like these are all traumas that I wish I had the time and chance to fix, but I've fucked things up too bad, and now there's like never going to be another chance. Like, there's a lot of like little notes to from Cassio to herself, like things I need to remember about this person, and that's all being erased. Like these are all like
True.
Yeah, like I wouldn't frame it as acceptance so much as just like pure despair and like I'm never going to come to terms with what happened. I don't know if either of you played the Epilogue. Epilogue, there's an extra chapter that came out around the Switch release that shows where people kind of go in like 30 years after.
No, I
Sean
didn't see
comes
that.
out
No, I
as
didn't.
non-binary and changes their name. And there's a few hints of that in the main narrative.
Yeah.
Mags kind of comes to terms with that she's gay, and you get some like choices here about like how it all plays out. But even putting that aside, I think this is an incredible story, and they did a great job with it.
Yeah.
Great game.
Yeah, great game.
Great game. Should we move on? Should we talk about We Know the Devil?
We Know the Devil.
You guys just talk. I'm gonna listen, and I'm gonna
yeah, wait till we've set up Ace before you chime in.
Take your time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what should we say about this game, Elliot? Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, so this is more traditionally what I would expect like a visual novel to be, and it's a story about three kids who are in some kind of summer camp for bad kids or whatever, and there's some weird supernatural stuff going on involving the devil and God that is, sort of very clearly a metaphor. And so it seems like what you get a number of choices throughout the story as to like which two of the three characters, and then one of them succumbs at the end based on those choices. And I think I mean, I had a very interesting experience with this because I was a huge Jupiter stan. Like I was trying to focus on Jupiter, so I kept sending her off on her own to because I thought it was going to follow her, and so then she died at the end.
She didn't. I don't think any of them actually die at the end. I think it's like they don't speak after succumbing to the devil, but it's unclear. Like you could interpret it either way. It is like functionally a death, I think, with how the metaphors work, but I don't think she necessarily died.
Sure. Yeah. I might be simple. It might not be the right word for it, but she definitely.
Keep talking.
Yeah. But yeah. So it was funny because the way I played the game, I ended up causing bad things to happen to the character who I was actually trying to support.
You monster.
But I did get Jupiter and Neptune to make out maybe more in the closet at one point, so that was a win.
Which is a very interesting setting for that to happen, and not the most subtle metaphor I've ever seen. But, all right.
What about you, Ruben?
In terms of the path that I went down, I think I had similar reaction to you. I tried to set up Jupiter and Neptune, but I obviously did it the way that it clearly indicates that you're meant to do it by sending the other person off, which meant Venus for me was the one who got possessed. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed the writing in this game and the characterization. I think these three core characters really bounce off each other incredibly well. I think the metaphor, and maybe this is just because I played the game once and you might need to experience the 4 possible endings that
you do, but continue.
Especially because the fact that there are 4 endings in and of itself indicates that there's
I didn't know there was a
final ending that helps tie things together more. Because I only played it once, I feel like some of the metaphorical layering was lost on me, right? I mean, obviously this is kind of analogous to these three struggling with their own identities and maybe even going as far as it being explicitly a like Christian conversion camp.
Yeah, I think that's what it's setting up. At least like on a... It's set in the same universe as one of the studio's other visual novels, and I think like it is meant to be, again, like kind of magical realism. There's a lot going on here. Like they reference transformation sequences at some point, and the characters are, I think, modeled off Sailor Moon characters. Like there is more going on here than you would think initially. Like it is an alternate universe essentially, but it's an alternate universe, slightly mystical conversion.
Yeah, like the like God is someone you can listen to on the radio. There's like
which
sirens.
Again, I love that.
Detect
like
the devil.
Yeah. It sets such a strong aesthetic and like atmosphere of unease.
It does an incredible job of building up that. Yeah, so you both.
What did you think of our reviews?
So you both played one ending, huh? Just the one. Look, I can't. Yeah, sorry.
I didn't realize there were different ones until this morning.
I can't pretend I'm an expert in visual novels. I haven't played a lot of them, and I don't know them particularly well. But I do know that a large part of the culture or the way that people tend to play them is like, yeah, there are multiple endings, and you're going to have to rewind and like look over old text and skip through it and make different choices to figure out the other endings. And a really common trope in dating sims in particular is like a secret ending where you get to date all the characters at once. I'm not sure how to talk about this. I'm not sure where to start with this. I think it is.
Wait, you get to date all the characters at once. Who's the you in that sentence?
I mean, like in dating sims, often the main character.
Oh, sorry.
Self for the audience. So yes,
I think this might be the first visual novel I've played, unless we're going to count any of the other game clubs.
That's fascinating. I wish I'd known that ahead of time. I'm very sorry. I would have given you both some instructions there.
I've played some visual novels. Don't have to lump me in with this heathen, right?
I think this game was incredible, and it might have been my favorite of the bunch.
It was right up there for me, and I've only apparently played a quarter of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much to spoil now.
Wait, so what's the fourth ending? Yeah. Okay, so there's one for each of them.
Right.
Is the fourth ending they're all fine?
Yes, let's say that.
Oh, okay. Well, then it's the other one.
Yeah, the very first scene sets up pretty early that like this idea that like you might try to keep a friendship going with three people, but it's just unsustainable. That you need to like leave someone behind and cut them out. And that's kind of the gameplay mechanic. That every time you're given a choice, there's going to be one popping up here soon. You basically pick who plays up and who goes off on their own, and who gets excluded. And that active exclusion, each character has a little tick that sort of lets you know that they're coming closer to the coming. And the act of being excluded starts exacerbating those ticks, basically. So the game just checks. Here it is. Here's like picking who pairs up.
Is that why Neptune was coughing so much?
Yeah. So she.
Oh, that's what the coughing was.
Yeah, and
right.
Venus sees lights, and
the flick
Jupiter,
of the wristband.
Yeah, which is really interesting.
See,
I know that.
Sorry, I don't think Venus ever saw. Oh no, I sent him up to do the siren, and he saw some weird stuff, and then he never touched it again. I think I got scared for him. Yeah. Okay.
There is a lot of analysis I would love to do about this in terms of like what the characters do and are, but each of them kind of has a fatal flaw that leads them to succumbing.
I think it captures a really cool vibe of like these three have formed a friendship of circumstance more than anything else, and they're just supporting each other because they have no one else.
It is that, and it's absolutely that, and I think it's also that each of these characters is fundamentally like hurting and lost and needs support that the other two can give, but by being excluded, they aren't offered that support. So, sorry, to be explicit, and there's some spoilers here, Venus is a closeted trans girl, and in her ending, she sort of comes to terms with that before being bludgeoned and forced back into the closet by the two other people. Jupiter is, as far as I can tell, a lesbian, or at least bi, and just has no no way to grapple with that. She just like cannot confront that reality. She's just like full of urges. I can't remember. Sorry, which one of you had Jupiter's ending? But
that was me.
She talks about having like not being allowed to touch anyone, but also and the hands that come out of her kind of represent that those urges. If you take Venus into the closet, she starts. I don't remember exactly what happens, but I think Jupiter gets a little bit like sick of her or frustrated with her, and like one of the hands attacks Venus. Like there's a lot of stuff early on that sort of sets this all up. Neptune I didn't understand quite as well, but as far as I read it, she's a really perceptive person who kind of hides a lot of her own issues behind this like rudeness and frankness, and like I think she knows that she needs to help her friends, but she also can't rush them. She can't like force them to these conclusions. And she's like giving everything she can. Like her coughing becomes vomiting, becomes bile, and in her ending, she starts just leaking ichor basically, and like forces it down Venus's throat in an attempt to force Venus to like the implication is that she's going to force this onto her friends, and that will force them to accept the truths that they're hiding from themselves. I think this game is fucking extraordinary. I think it sets up really early on the implication that the camp is intentionally driving people towards becoming the devil. It pairs every group up into three and like talks about like exclusion and these things. There's a mention really early on of like something smelling, like the fire having something to do with like ashes of monsters of the week or something. The implication there, I think, being that they will like force kids into this house and like let them come out of the closet and then force them back in there violently, and like that becomes the path towards accepting God. And that is what happens in all three of the main endings. I'm not sure if I should I talk about the both endings specifically? Like,
I'm torn. I'm torn as somebody who wants to experience it, but like I also feel like we should talk about it here today.
Yeah.
So before we do, can I just quickly say, it has only become clear to me through this conversation that being possessed by the devil seems to be them coming out. Like, I thought I had it as a bad thing in my head, and
there's a lot of discussion about morality and like being bad versus being good. Neptune is really just like accepting that she's bad, and I read someone say that like Neptune genuinely believes she's bad and that the other two are good, and that when they start saying like how they think they might be the devil, she gets genuinely upset at that, like the implication that these people might be flawed, whereas she's just kind of accepted that she is
it'll be her.
doomed to eternal damnation. Yeah. The fourth ending does something incredible. I will stay a little bit vague on it, but it's hard for me to. What I'm talking about here with the metaphor is the devil is acceptance. It absolutely just like guns for that. Like that is the whole entire point of, I think, the story and what it's going for. In my own writing, I think I've tended towards something similar. I've had a lot of people express surprise that I haven't read this game before. It's often used as a point of comparison to my own work, and I can see why, because the first three endings do kind of mirror a lot of how I approach like embracing the monstrous and then a return to the normal. And the fourth ending kind of rejects that. And I think it has to, because the normal here is so just profoundly broken. There is no like way to return to normal when normal was the problem that like left you in this state in the first place. It really is going to influence how I approach stuff in the future creatively. In terms of my own identity, this is just an incredible fucking game.
Sorry, I know you said you didn't want us to touch on Cover Me in Leaves too much, but I see that comparison as well. Actually, like that. Yeah, I feel like dealing with these sort of complex issues in the same sort of way and dressing them up in similar-ish metaphors. I can see that.
Yeah, I wish. I kind of wish I'd known about this game or had. I think I felt embarrassed, honestly, was my first reaction to have written Cover Me in Leaves in this way. I've sort of reasoned it through. Like, I'm proud of what I made there. But what this ending, what the fourth ending manages is just incredible. It's really just like a class apart from any other writing I've seen in this sphere. And I would urge you all to go play it and try to get that yourselves.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'll try and get the other three endings.
I'm assuming to get the fourth ending, we need to have gotten the other three. Is that right?
I would urge you to
Sure.
do that first. I don't actually think so, but
Okay.
My guess at how you get the fourth ending is you be really clever and make sure you exclude everyone the same amount.
Right. Well, there are 7 choices, so good luck with that.
Yeah,
but...
wrong.
Never mind.
No, give it a go. See if that does anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like every choice has a different scene, so it lets you learn more about these characters.
Yeah, I wish I'd paid closer attention to which choices I'd made, so that now I'm going back, I could intentionally do all the opposite ones.
You can save and you can rewind. I had a slightly difficult experience with this game because the Mac version of it on Steam just won't launch anymore, and the Windows version, I had a few bugs after like saving and loading that it wouldn't let me open up the menu again.
Weird.
It's built using it's kind of like an HTML file behind the scenes and wrapped up in the same kind of app that Discord uses to distribute EXEs and stuff. Yeah, Electron, yeah, that's the one. And that's what I use for Cover Me in Leaves too. And I have personally dealt with how goddamn difficult it can be to polish game using that framework. So like I'm not surprised. I hope I can convey just like how incredible this experience is, despite even those problems I had with it.
Yeah. Well, as we'll dive back in.
Yeah, definitely. It's a strong recommendation, so
yeah,
gotta carry it out.
All right.
God, I almost feel like one day we're just gonna have to do like a game club that's dedicated to going back and doing all the things at the end of months that we say we want to do.
We can call it New Game Club Plus.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty good. Pretty good.
Thanks.
Anyway, yeah. So
right.
Okay, now we should touch on. I think it was dubbed in your document, Elliot, the interactive fiction pack, but this was just a group of smaller games.
Yeah, so these are all pretty short. None of us got to with those with Love Alive because that it was the longest of the bunch, and we all kind of just ran out of time. But the rest of these range from 10 seconds to, I think the Tower Trilogy all up is probably about an hour long. But the rest are pretty short.
I'd say the last one in the trilogy was like 20-ish minutes, and that was.
It is. It's basically a cutscene. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I really liked Quiz in Love at the End of the World. It was a very fun one. I don't know if I have the word for it. Like experiment feels wrong, but it's like
it's bizarre. I've never seen anything else like it.
It's genuinely like a little art piece. Like it's got a thing it's doing, and it does it.
That's
very
kind of how it feels. Yeah. There's no like, it's very branching. There's no specific linear narrative. I think a lot of people will probably play this one and maybe not connect with it, but I really just loved it as an experience. I think it's a really strong statement. I wish I totally forgot to, but discussing before like whether Celeste is explicitly like a queer game and what it means for a game to be queer. Like Life is Strange was on the voting list, and I don't know, like I think that came at a time where people were so like starved for representation that it kind of passed as like this game is like revolutionary, and it kind of was. Like at the time it really was, but looking back now, like is any part of that really like gonna stand next to like the explorations of identity and all those queer issues that like something like Tao touches on. I don't know. I think Celeste is just like such a personal game that I can't see it as anything but queer. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's interesting to. I would have honestly had fun sitting down and just tearing apart Life is Strange. I think so. Like something like Gone Home too. I almost included that just because it would have been so interesting in hindsight to play through that game today. I mean, it only came out what, like 10 years ago at the absolute most, but things have changed so much. Like our expectations for representation and perspective in narratives has changed so much that I just think playing through it would be such a fundamentally different experience now.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting to note as well. Like, I think something that if the positive side of what Witch Undo is promote the exploration of these different types of narratives, I think it's fair to acknowledge that they obviously all have a different level of, like, I don't know what the right word is, like approachability.
Yeah.
Like how big of
Yeah, I
is
think
a
so.
leap for me to go from a game that I play all the time to a game that is like a narrative. Interactive narrative,
Exactly.
visual narrative kind of thing. Where
Yeah,
Celeste
yeah.
obviously very approachable for like traditional game players.
Yeah, like Celeste is
and
the
then-
sort of game, I'd played it already. It was the sort of game
Yes.
I play. It was a platformer. I
Right,
don't
yeah.
usually play short narrative ones, so these were all very fun for me because it was quite novel in that they were novels. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's even that much to say about Quiz and Love at the end of the last. Someone in chat is saying that it was kind of frustrating because they are a slow reader, which is
Yeah,
very relatable.
fair enough.
I had that. I was going through most of the choices like a couple of times to actually read them.
I think that frantic, like, I cannot reach the end of this path, like, I don't get to see everything, like I need to move quickly, I need to miss things just to, like, get as far as I can. I think that's really intentional. I think that's the whole, like, the experience. I
Yeah.
heard someone say that they managed to get to the end of every path they took, and I hope that person is having fun just reading 3 times as fast as I am. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything to add to it. I just thought it was a really cool experience. I don't know if it's explicitly queer, but I feel like it is in spirit. I can't really vocalize that, but I think that, like, desperation and frantic, like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really cool experience. That's kind of all I've got.
Fair enough.
I wanted to call out Exile. I really enjoyed Exile. That's exactly my kind of vibe. That creepy, alone horror, and then it took me a second to figure out what it was doing when the mermaid lady showed up. Yeah, I really enjoyed Exile.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot too.
I am a little biased here. I'm friends with the creator, and I sort of helped a little bit with the narrative when it was in production. But yeah, I really fucking love this. Playing through it, like the final version of it, is just like a really cool experience. Rachel did a great job with the sound design and the graphics here. It reminds me a lot of one of Lovecraft's earlier stories. I think it was called like The Temple or The Submarine or something. It's just a bunch of army dudes trapped in a submarine, and they all sort of slowly go insane and like leave in search of this like temple that's calling to them. From memory, that wasn't an intentional reference, but I think it fills a very similar function. I also think it works a lot better because that calling is really, really framed in deliberate character decisions that at least really resonated with me. I just think this is a really cool little story, and I wanted to use my chance at nepotism to include it.
Good use.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this one as well. I think something that probably should have become clearer to me earlier, but didn't become clear to me until this month, is the way that what I would guess we could call horror narratives, like Exile kind of is, We Know the Devil kind of is, right?
Yes.
The way that we could use, the way that an author could use the concept of like body horror as an easy metaphor to help people who haven't had any gender dysphoria or body dysphoria experiences, like myself.
Yeah, boy. So we've been at this for 2 hours, and you just picked like the one topic I'm most passionate about.
Oh, interesting.
I have a lot of feelings about horror. I am like a huge wimp. I cannot like really realistically enjoy horror. I watched Hereditary in theaters, and that was just a traumatic experience. Also not my favorite movie. But anyway,
It's got Tony Collette, Australian
We did.
representation.
Do you remember you watched that one time when you came to visit me, Ruben? Do you remember that? And then we stayed up for like 3 hours playing Mario Maker before we could go to bed.
Yeah.
all right, I'm sensing Mario Maker might be something of that.
It's just a coincidence.
Anyway, yeah. Horror is, to give you the Cliff's Note version, horror is very much like steeped in representing and exploring the overlap between the monstrous and the marginalized. Like if you look back at old, like the Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, that a lot of old sci-fi comes from current fears at the time. So Attack of the 50-Foot Woman and Godzilla, that's like nuclear weapons and power. Something like Attack of the Pod People or whatever it's called, that was like the Red Scare, McCarthyism, the House Un-American, fear of communism, right? This idea that like you might have like your neighbors might be secretly working against you and you'd have no idea because they don't seem outwardly any different. Over time, that's become a little more zombies originally come from a fairly racist place, I think. I think like a lot of horror monsters take scary things from the marginalized, like particularly people, Black people have often been a source of like horrific elements. People with disabilities. It's very, very common for those things to be taken and portrayed as monstrous and therefore like a source of horror. And I think over time, especially with marginalized creators, there's been a reclaiming of that. So that's what We Know the Devil is. That's what my work often tends towards. I think Exile and the Tower trilogy is exactly that again. Like it's just and I mean not to explicitly draw like Twitter culture into this, but it is really, really common for like, I don't want to say monster fucking, but like it's definitely like the idea of Twilight really had like this glamorized like pretty boy vampire, right? But it also had a werewolf, and the deeper you go into like queer culture, you'll often see that like there is an attraction to the monstrous. We had Monster Prom a while back, and that's probably like the most mainstream I've seen that whole train of thought go. But
or The Shape of Water, I guess is
yeah. Thank you. That's exactly it. So that's 100% what it is, and the main character in that, she's deaf, and her disability becomes this point of relation, and it I think in the end it literally turns her monstrous. But that act of becoming monstrous is salvation and escape.
Exactly.
It's a relief.
And I want to kind of pull that back to Exile, I guess, because the story of Exile is, at the end of this, it's somebody effectively making the decision to turn into a monster, right? And I think 100%. It's easy to take in your baggage to that. And I think that's what I had, and be like, oh, this is an evil mermaid that is here to fuck
yeah.
But, as you sit with it more, it's this person has been so the main character has been so unhappy with their life. Like it is a release. It is them finding something that actually makes them feel like they belong somewhere for once, right? The fact that it's wrapped in a bit of body horror is something that you kind of have to let yourself get past to get to that.
Pure distilled catharsis, yeah. And I just wanted to also add that body horror is often used as like Junji Ito in particular, like this idea that like you can like run away from a monster or like your own traumas, but your body is the thing that you're trapped in. Like if that starts decaying, you are stuck there. There's nothing you can do. There's no way to escape this. Exile is a fucking incredible exploration of body horror through that lens. And again, like if you think about it, that kind of really ties into disability, because people with disabilities do have to live in this meat prison, and so frequently that's played as horror. So yeah, it surprises me exactly zero that so much queer lit is about like horror and reclamation. And I really made a conscious choice to include as much of that as I could. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to quickly touch on it, obviously, Cover Me in Leaves is a narrative of reclamation of one's body. Right?
I am hovering over the disconnect from call button. I will click it. Don't tell me.
Yeah.
It is.
True. Yeah.
Okay. I want to touch on Perseids just because it might be the one that doesn't fit that horror bill. So
it does. I needed to include something lighter, and I fucking adore that story.
It's just a nice, heartwarming story about like 4 gals having a good time, and I really liked it.
No, it's truly incredible. I'm not sure how much there is to add. I really need to play it again. It's been a while, but I love that. The soundtrack is fantastic. The person who created that, Freya, is another friend of mine. She is very talented and very prolific. These 4 games of hers that I included, I wish I'd had the chance to be less nepotistic, but unfortunately, like, there aren't many people making these kinds of games, and the ones who are, they were all kind of, they fall into similar circles, I think. There's a lot of other games I wish I could have had the chance to include here, but yeah, I adore Perseids. I think it's just like a really wonderful story. I don't know if I have anything explicit analysis to add there, but
no, me either. It was just a simply fun experience.
Yeah, honestly, it's just kind of like a lovely good time.
Yeah,
and I really appreciate that, because a lot of queer narratives are steeped in tragedy. Like there's no avoiding that. And I think it's because, like, as a writer, everything I've seen just screams to me that the majority of writers are processing trauma when they write. They might not necessarily mean to. I mean, people have asked me if Cover Me in Leaves was autobiographical, and it really wasn't at all. But at the same time, like, if you squint your eyes and look in there and know me, like, even any amount at all, there's a lot of like me in there and my own issues and what I was working through at the time. And I mean, I don't want to speak for Freya, like there might be a lot of trauma in this one too, but it also just, it felt like a relief. Like, no one died. It was just about like the love all of these characters shared. And I love it a lot. Yeah. It was, I think maybe other than Celeste, it was the one like truly happy story in here, and I just wanted to.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you did. I played it right in the middle of all these stories, so it was kind of the pick me up I needed.
Good. I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah, I guess it's good to have. I mean, again, not to speak to an experience that isn't my own, but I can imagine it's obviously to the extent at which your identity, your self-perception changes, it must be very traumatic, right? But also obviously rewarding. I think it's easy for a lot of these narratives to have focuses on the fact that is such maybe traumatic is not the right word, but like a revolutionary experience. And it's nice to also have some that are it's nice to have some that are also, hey, this is a positive, like the reason that I'm going through such a difficult time is because I want to get to the actual positive version of myself, you know?
Yeah, there's a novel called Nevada that's really quite well known in trans circles. It's actually a really great book. You all should check it out. And I remember, apparently at least, the reason it was significant at the time was because it focused on a trans woman as the protagonist who was already fully transitioned. Like, there was no struggle around her own gender. It's just like she's living as a trans girl, and everything that follows is about that. I think there is a similar, like, I can sort of see similarities between like Perseids and Exile and the House of God, but it really feels like not a postscript, but it's just set after that struggle of acceptance. Like, I'm sure like none of the characters are in great places. I'm sure they all have their own baggage of trauma that they need to work through, but it's set after that struggle that seems to influence so much trans literature. And I really appreciate that. It's nice to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This has been a very emotionally intense game club, which I'm all for. I love it.
I like
it. Has. I'm sorry I packed this so full. I
No,
thought it
it's
would be a
good.
little.
No, it's good.
The Tower trilogy is probably the heaviest of the lot, honestly, for me.
Yeah.
And
That was dark.
yeah, it really fucking is. I absolutely cried over it at least once. I don't really know what to say about it other than it's very recognizable. I think this idea of wanting like escapism and easy fixes without addressing the underlying trauma uh, in your life it's very relatable to me.
Yeah.
And I talked to Freya, and the antagonists in these stories, they represent so many different things. It's um I don't honestly feel qualified, I guess, in this case to like talk about exactly what the story is doing. There was one amazing moment where the character is climbing up the tower and they see through a window. They see themselves looking like unrecognizable and alien with like
Mm.
huge eyes or like bigger eyes than normal. Um, and that just like gut punched me because there's a lot of weird effects of estrogen, but one of them is like your eyes just become bigger. I don't know specifically how it happens. Not like your eyeballs, but if you took a before and after photo, the eyes are often much bigger, and like that realization and crystallization in that. I think about it a lot because I don't think even other trans people would necessarily like click with that moment, and I'm sure there were many other moments that I didn't myself click with that other people did.
That certainly didn't register for me.
Yeah. It's been a while since I played this ones too. They mean a lot to me. I love them. They are incredible stories. Very, very, very difficult to read. But
yeah, I like how it also each one changed up the way you interact with it in a cool way.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and by the end, it's like it's an inevitability. That last one, it really is. Like, there's nothing you can do to stop what's happening, and it ends in a way that I think is halfway between like cathartic and wish fulfillment. But it really got to me, and I love what she did though. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Was there anything else anyone wants to say on these before we move into? Or actually, let's just open it up to the Q&A in general. Maybe,
yeah, well, let's
and we can talk about
if
anything else.
anyone is still listening and has this unmuted, please feel free to throw us questions.
I feel bad now that I was so forceful about telling people to
scared everyone off,
not get spoiled on the end of If Found, but it really, yeah, I just want everyone to be able to experience that game, you know.
That's fair.
All right. I guess unless anyone has any questions at all, we have 14 people still. We don't know if anyone's.
We should I should quickly call out Miss Evil Doom, sorry, in a YouTube chat. Talks about a Lindsay Ellis video called Monster Boyfriend, which is about what we were talking about before with the idea of horror being a kind of way to articulate kind of cultural fears, I guess, and the reappropriation of that as like an object of desire.
I mean, the way I've heard it put before is that like at least personally, like my own like needs and wants and desires have been portrayed to me as so monstrous that like of course like one of the ways that I might approach that and reclaim that and process it is through other things that are like difficult, traumatic, taboo. I mean, I'd probably make out with a vampire, but I'm not gonna like bang a werewolf. To be clear, I don't want to paint myself in the bad light here. But also, you know, there isn't really a bad light here, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I should watch that video.
It is a good video. I've seen it.
Also,
yeah.
Sorry,
I mean,
I don't think anyone's brought up in the comments. I just want to quickly go in here and just mention it as well. There was a Celeste 2 or Celeste Classic 2 that came out like
Oh
2 weeks
yeah, that
ago.
just
Oh
came out
yes.
very recently.
Wait, sorry. Before we segue to this, I just want to say one more thing on the monster boyfriend topic. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Which is that, I mean, it's interesting that this has come up during this as well, because obviously the other show that we do is talking about Pale, which is a show that is a novel, and I won't spoil it here, but is like kind of explicitly about the humanization of monsters, right?
Yeah.
In a really interesting way.
Yeah, I don't want to drag her into this. I hope she's not listening. But another member of the Doof troupe, Alexandra, when we first started talking, she shared a piece of, I guess, fan fiction she'd written for that was very much about like gender and oh, she's right here.
Yep.
Hi, Lexi. I actually
Lexi wrote
yeah,
something for All Packed Up.
Yes.
Is that the one that was like
That's
discussing
the
fairy.
one, and that was kind of the moment that cemented to me that I need to maybe hit this girl with a stick until she figures some things out. When she actually like came out, I woke up and like I was so surprised. I had no idea, and I wrote her a story to do the right thing, like a little bit. I think like a day or two after. Oh no, sorry, she came out to me, and then this was before she came out publicly, and she had to read the story and discuss it on the podcast without letting on that it was about her. But yeah, like I absolutely used that universe as a way of exploring gender and sexuality and all of these things. And I haven't read the source material, but I'm really excited to. I think it's just kind of a testament to like how recurring a theme this is, the overlap between temptations of like the monstrous and temptations of gender and sexuality. Yeah.
And just identity, I suppose, as a whole.
Identity, yeah, that's the word. All right. Favorite chapter of Celeste and why?
Yeah.
I've got to look through them all so I can remember which one's which.
Oh god! By the time you've played the B and tried some of the C sides, it's embedded into you.
I would have said 7, but I think John's asking us to just pick from 1 to 6. I think probably the first level, honestly. Second level's cool. Third level requires a little more timing than I'm capable of. Fourth level has wind, but also just like the first level is so like incredibly tightly designed, and the realization that like this already really well designed level can be played through without even using the core gameplay mechanic. The fact that Maddie then went through and like enabled that, I don't know. It's a masterwork of level design, 100%.
I think the highest moment I had in this game was way back in the day, the first time I played Chapter 2, and the space blocks opened up, and I could go through the space gems.
Yes,
and I think, like, Chapter 2 will always hold this special place in my heart for that reason, because it always feels like this is the one where I'm like, you've got to play it till this point, because this is when you realize how great a game it is. But then I actually think, aside from that moment, Chapter 2 might be one of the most boring from a design perspective, because it's
probably fair.
Like compared to like Chapter 5 is like a light Metroidvania almost. Like it
almost, yeah, I can see that.
It's got like a great maze. I very much enjoyed that one. I probably have to say I think 5 is the one that impresses me the most.
I think just regarding level 2, the chase sequences with Battleon are actually kind of incredible design. I wish I talked about this before. It's so effective at putting pressure on you, but as long as you keep moving, they will never catch you.
Yeah.
So it's not even, it doesn't become a chase sequence. It's literally just Snake. It's like making sure that you don't cross the same
area your tail. Yeah,
you don't cross the tail. I don't think there's a lot of directions they can take that is the trouble. But I think for what it is and what it does is it's really, really, really effective.
In general, I like that all of the boss fights in Celeste don't even really feel like boss fights. They're all just platforming challenges where the boss is just adding a challenge. Like Battleline in Chapter 2 is just adding the snake thing. Ashiro just adds basically a worse version of the snowballs from Chapter 4.
Yeah, exactly. And they're a little more predictable. Once you learn how both of them work, they're pretty easy to navigate.
Yeah, and like Chapter 6, Battleline in that one as well, like it's just some lasers and some balls that she shoots in. Actually, not at all a randomized way.
So I think yeah, I think chapter 1 is incredible design. I also kind of just love chapter 6 and what it does. Like the emotionality and the movement from like quiet reflection and like despair to like I'm going back to climb this whole fucking mountain is really well executed.
I like what
So
Wildbug brought up before, how it's so much more open because you've sort of hit rock bottom.
yeah, and there's no stories to collect, which is another thing. I don't really know exactly what they represent. I've heard people say like your spirit of adventure or whatever, but
It represents me losing a lot of time because I was convinced I was just missing them and I was getting more and more desperate.
All right, other questions. I am not an Edward stan. Alice stan, maybe? I don't know. I'm a little more Jacob than Edward, actually, funnily enough. He just seems more interesting.
Wait, Ruben, did you say what your favorite chapter of Celeste was?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't remember. I would say the chapter that had the mechanic I liked the most also had the chapter that had the mechanic I liked the least, which was the summit. The wind I hated so much, but those moving blocks that you could also kind of steer sometimes, I found those really fun. So.
Oh, true.
So yeah, maybe
I love
both my favorite and least favorite.
What are both of your opinions on the clouds? Because I found those a very interesting. See, I love the clouds.
A great example of how the controls just weren't doing it for me.
It's just springs from Mario Maker.
Once you figure out that there's a grace period at the end of every, like the blocks, the dream blocks, the Space Jam, the clouds, there's a little window at the end, so it's easier once you start timing stuff later. Yeah, I didn't love the clouds, but I figured out how they worked fairly quickly. Yeah.
The next question's to you, Elliot, from
yeah, it is. I'm gonna yell at her for this later. I don't know. I originally actually wrote that game very late 2019. And it was just like a short story. I got recruited into like a game jam experiment almost, where everyone just made like a 10-minute game, and it was released as a paid bundle, just to see like whether short games could make a profit on Steam, which they did, thankfully, a very small amount, and I've made basically no money from it after paying everyone. Yeah, it was. At the time, I was sort of aware that something was a little up with my gender, but I was very, very certain that this wasn't like a trans story. This was just like a gay girl in a small town, just like dealing with her traumas and escaping it. And looking back now, like I said, there's a few similarities between myself and Maddie Thorson there.
I was already picking up on that as you were explaining it. I was like, this does sound like I'm reading Maddie's article again. It's just like, at the time, it was just I was writing this, and then later on, it was like, oh no, okay.
I think part of that is when we were gearing up release, which was all of September and then the first week of October. That was when like I was having to accept that I was a girl, basically. And so it really forced me to look at that story in a new light. And I came out publicly 3 days before it launched, which kind of colored the press coverage a little bit, but I'm kind of glad too. Like I'm glad that it is explicitly seen that way. I wish I'd made it more explicit, honestly, in the text, now thinking back, but I like almost that it's a relic of its time. And yeah, it's both really cool and absolutely mortifying that such a personal thing of mine exists. But I guess that's just writing.
Yeah. It's a good game. Right. If you haven't checked it out, people.
Oh god. I like it. Yeah, genuinely I'm proud of it. Like I'm constantly embarrassed whenever it comes up, and I need to work on that. But I'm really proud of what me and my friends managed to make with it.
Yeah, you should be.
Do we have any other questions? The rest was just kind of comments on people's favorite chapters.
BL Ash has said that the feathers don't control well, and that's the only reason Chapter 6 is bad. And to that I say, those are fully analog. You should be playing on a controller. They play like a dream on the controller. I actually, when I'm playing a level with a feather in it, the second I hit the feather, I have to move my thumb to the control stick, and then as soon as it starts flashing, I have to move my thumb back onto the D-pad. And that system works really well for me.
Those were a little frustrating, but I didn't find them any worse than like the clouds until I hit the level 6 B and C sides and farewell, and that was when I started. I think I actually had to learn how they controlled rather than just doing it by instinct. But again, I think like even though these mechanics are a little difficult or frustrating, they're also really, really consistent. Like once you learn how something works, it's really hard to consistently mess it up from there. Like I remember there is a secret collectible in the very last room of Farewell. Once you beat it, instead of finishing the level, you go all the way back, do like this crazy climb, and unlock like a secret room. You can collect a like moonberry, and this final room. It involves a lot of like jumping around with jellyfish and spikes, and I mean it's the same as every other level in Celeste, but it's both like profoundly difficult and a little longer than is comfortable. And getting past the first obstacle probably took me 10-15 minutes just to learn how everything worked. And at the time I was like, you know what, this is bullshit, this is shitty level design, I hate this so much. And I kept saying that at every point in time. After like dying to an obstacle, I would just speedrun effortlessly through every other thing I'd called bullshit and unfair up until that point. And then I would die to that obstacle again, but I'd get a little bit further or like learn how it works a little better. And I'm not saying I could go back and beat Farewell now, but I'd have like a much better chance than yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably how I'd phrase it. That like this shit is genuinely difficult, but it's really consistent. Yeah, like once you learn it, it's hard to.
I had a conversation earlier in the month with someone where we settled on the terminology that I still quite like of Celeste is never unfair, but it might be unreasonable.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way
I
of putting
do
it.
like that.
And I'm glad for that reason that the assist mode exists and that Farewell is largely optional, as is the core, as is everything past the main story. I think the main story is fucking phenomenal and enough to cement this as one of my favorite games, and I think that wholly unnecessary, but I had a lot of fun finishing it. Not necessarily playing it, but I had a lot of fun finishing it, yes.
Also, quickly want to jump in. People are talking about the teal bubbles in the chat, and I have to agree with Miss Evil Doom. They are my least favorite mechanic in the game, mostly because the red bubbles exist, and I just felt like the red bubbles were the teal bubbles, but good.
It's just like a dash, but locked in place, basically, that restores your dash. I think there's some cool stuff with it. It doesn't feel as intuitive as a lot of the other mechanics, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that's
right,
probably going to wrap it up. We're
talking about Hades right now, next?
Yeah, so next month, we're going to be playing Hades.
Oh, next month. Okay, sure.
I haven't played it yet, so I can't talk about it.
I have. I finished it. I had fun with it. I wish things progressed a little faster in terms of resources, but I think it's a really cool game, and I hope you all have fun with it.
Spoilers, Gelliot. Come on.
Have you played it, Ruben?
I have not, but I have a friend who talks about it so much that I feel like I've played it.
Rings a few bells, yeah.
I mean, you know the time. Yeah. People, obviously, this is a game that is deeply connected with a lot of people.
Yeah,
very deeply. So I'm excited to see why.
Yeah.
I don't know. Weirdly, I'm excited about the roguelite part of this because I've heard it does cool things with the roguelike formula. It's the hack and slash combat that to me, I'm like, that's not usually something I play, but
I mean, the way I'd phrase it is, like Dark Souls and Hollow Knight have the same mechanic, which is just like you drop a bunch of resources wherever you died, and that is a really simple incentive to go back and try again, right? So it forces you back down that same path to keep you determined, to keep you stubborn, to keep you going. Hades does a lot of. It doesn't have the same mechanics, sorry to be clear, but it has a lot of similarly thought through mechanics that like try to keep you assisting with the your attempts to escape from hell. And in that sense, I think it's really, really, really well designed. It's probably actually my least favorite Supergiant game, but it's still like fucking great, and I like it a lot.
Yeah. Supergiant is our first repeat
developer.
developer. Yes, I forgot the
nice.
word.
Yeah, we did
Nice.
Transistor back in May.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I think I disagree with you both on, but I will. From what I've had.
Well, you weren't here for that one, so
Yeah.
doesn't
Wait,
count.
You don't like it?
Oh no, I love it. I thought at least one.
We didn't like it enough, I guess, Elliot.
Oh, I liked it.
But not
All right,
enough.
as you liked it. I won't yell.
Okay. I'm confused. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, so yeah, we'll be back because February is 28 days. That means it'll be the same date in March, so the 6th of March. Yeah, and we'll dive into this game. I think Ruben and I'll both stream this one throughout the month.
Yes, I think so.
But thanks for joining us, Elliot.
Have fun. Thank you for having me
Yeah,
on.
it was really nice
yeah.
having you on.
Really nice being here. All right, cool. Let's get out of here.
Cool. Thanks for coming along, everyone. Catch you next
Deuces,
month.
YouTube.
See you next month.
Peace out.